Okay, guys, we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I'll be your friendly shop steward today, because today we are going to be we're not carrying on with, but we're going to be spending some time talking about our campaign, our ongoing campaign playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition in our custom setting of the Spires of Paridar. Today, we're going to be doing a belated, about almost year and a half review or retrospective on our Spires of Paridar campaign. We do this in a lot of our other campaigns to talk about, what's happened and kind of how the game came together and what everyone's experience with the game has been thus far. And we thought we would, now that we're up to 33 sessions in this campaign, that would be a time well spent, especially for a campaign that we did not expect to go beyond a holiday adventures. So with me today are the stars of the Spires of Paridar campaign. I'll go the order I've got you guys on the screen here. Why don't you tell us who you are and who you play in the campaign. First up, we've got Darren.
Hello there, Darren here. I play Dr. Adam Ersprung, who is our physician. His actual class is Inventor, and he's got his trusty sidekick, Igor.
Nice. Next up is Ingolf.
Hi, I'm Ingolf. I'm playing Basil Rathbone, who is an Isoki detective.
Nice.
And investigator is the class is called. Yeah.
Nice. Next up is James.
Yeah, I'm James. I play Sally Dumer, the Azarketi monk, but really more ex-socialite detective.
Very nice. And we think that joining us shortly will be Sean as well, who plays Golag. But we'll see. Hopefully that works out. So guys, we are, I mentioned, we're 33 sessions in. Now we have played 8 different mysteries in the course of that time. For those who may be new to the campaign or as who haven't watched from the beginning, this game originally was kicked off as something that I was intending on going home for the holidays in 2021, and then just there was a surge in COVID. I was not able to go home because of that, and as a result, I sent an email out to everyone on the roster and said I'm planning on running some games over the holidays, and threw together this. Spires of Paridar used a bunch of pre-generated characters, and I just tried to lean into a lot of the things that I really liked about, just things that I like in general in RPGs, the Victorian setting, the class disparity or class conflict issues, steampunk, but taken from a more working class perspective as opposed to the, aristocracy or the capital perspective. And also just grabbing everything that I'd liked about Pathfinder 2nd Edition in the same way that Eberron was built at the time with everything that was in D&D 3.5. I took the same idea, or 3rd edition, I think. Actually, Eberron came out with 3rd. Right? This may be a point of trivia, but I think the first Eberron book came out... Was it one of the ones that came out in 3 or 3.5? Do you guys remember? Offhand?
If you would ask me, I would say 3.5. It came later.
Yeah, I can't
closer
remember.
To the 4th edition.
Yeah, because I can't remember if it was one of the ones that grabbed, that had like a player's book that came out afterwards to adapt it. Forgotten Realms did for sure. Well, in any event, it's the Eberron at the time was designed with the idea of everything you see in D&D would be in the game, and I wanted Spires Paridar to be this same kind of idea. That was the initial run of adventures, and then we just kept on playing. One of the other more, I mentioned, I called, it's in North America, it's Mother's Day today, so I called my mom this morning and I mentioned that she's part of the inspiration for this, because when I'm at home, she watches Murder, She Wrote reruns every day, because they're on one of the channels that they have. And it was watching that got me thinking about running something that was just a series of murder mysteries, or, at least mysteries to solve. And over the, we lost Darren already.
That was the first mystery.
That was the idea for the campaign, something that was going to be more, or at least for the initial adventures, and then it just kind of grew into what this is. What I thought we'd talk about, guys, is rather than just me yapping about the campaign in general, I thought we'd just talk a little bit. First off, is any thoughts you guys have about the campaign in general, about your characters, about what's happened over the course of it, and then I got some topics we'll go in. But before we do that, I thought I'd give you the titles of the 8 mysteries that we have played thus far. So those are, because one of them actually I forgot about. They are the Harrow Haunts of Yule, the Untimely Undeath of Major Fitzhume, Debts of the Deep Dark Sea, the Art of Labor Relations, the Endless Odyssey, Ill Tidings at the Poverty Pond, Fire and Brimstone, and then the Patchwork Pauper. Our sessions, each of these chapters has run from 1 session to 9 sessions, with an average of 4 and a mean of a median of about 3.5. So that's how long we've been spending in these. Each of the adventures as well, I have tried to shift the focus to highlight one of the characters' special connections to the city or their backstories. Actually, I wish it was. I genuinely have remained. I can read an Excel document, but I refuse to learn it because I fucking hate that program. So
this is my world.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I because of the day job related stuff, I do work with an awful lot of engineers who supply a lot of and economists who supply a lot of Excel. So I know how to read it. I don't know how to work it whatsoever. And then in addition to those 8 mysteries too, we most recently ran our first war story in this campaign, a literal war story set back during the time of the war, using a different set of rules. So before we get into the, some of the typical or specific areas I want to talk about, do you guys have anything you want to say about, as part of the intro about this campaign in general?
Well, it's funny. It's a game. It's had a lot of legs for a game which started with pre-gens.
Most definitely. I mean, you guys have really made these characters your own. I had rough sketches of these characters, but you guys complete with changing the name. Originally, Sally was called Sally of the Deep, and James wisely changed her name to Sally Dumer, which is a much better name.
Yeah. So it is a little bit strange because it is so Paridar seemed like, we did this thing on Christmas and then it evolves. And it is a little bit like this sandbox, but it gets more and more detailed. It reminds me a little bit of these traveler campaigns where you start somewhere and then you have the whole system and then another system and so on. So it gets more and more detailed, and that's awesome. Just great.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have, I did a count of it. We have slightly more than... And I'm missing some from the most recent campaign, but we have more than 50 named NPCs that you guys have interacted with in one capacity or another over the course of the campaign.
And most are still alive.
And most are still alive, yeah. Jared, what about you? Any opening comments on this?
I mean, I don't know what we're going to cover as we talk, but I was going to mention the NPCs. Like I say, I just think how the pre-gens have worked out again, which James mentioned. I think they just seem to fit together, and they've just sort of gelled together. And like you said, everyone's brought them to life. I sort of feel like I sort of know them all, and I think I almost know what's going to happen in every scene and situation, or at least how they're going to react. And yeah, I feel that we sort of live those characters more than I do in any other game, really. Oh, definitely. I think the way that you guys have also role played off one another, and you don't see that in every campaign, but all of you have done. That's one of the ways where I mean by you guys bring him to life is that, like, seeing you guys interact in character just for fun. Is great stuff, and it's got to the point where you can anticipate sort of what
how these characters might react. And also, I mean, you guys seem to have a good sense of what everyone can do as well. And we didn't have, at no point did we sit down and be like, okay, so and so is good at this, so you'll take care of these tasks and whatever else. You guys have just learned that stuff over the course of watching what people are good at or what people are garbage at. So it's been quite good that way. Any other comments before we dive into my my list? And for those listening at home, I have no idea how long this is going to go. We've got the full 3 hours that we play set aside for it, but we'll see. I don't want to stretch this out longer than necessary, but if we can, we'll keep yapping the whole time.
I doubt we'll take that long. We don't talk much normally.
Yeah, no, we're so not chatty Cathy's. Go ahead.
The one thing I think is also that it comes back to system. I think one thing that PF2 is really quite good at is that you can start at level 1 and you're not completely a numpty.
Yeah,
and that helped a bit. That everyone was fairly capable from the get-go and has got more capable without being overpowered either. And that's not every system would facilitate that.
Yeah, like there's definitely a that segues nicely into the next thing I was going to talk. Or the first thing I was going to talk about is system, because I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on what ways that the selection of system has really helped the campaign or really suited the campaign. I know, like Ingolf, you've commented before about how it's surprising that you could get this with PF2. And this is the only PF2 campaign that I've run, or even like short adventures, where I am actually using some of their house rules. We use the optional rules for gear in this just because I don't give out a lot of magic items or stuff like that. But apart from that, we play the game pretty much rules as written, which is unusual for for me.
Well, I think it's worked well because everyone's a bit rounded, and they're good at some things, but they're not absolutely one-trick ponies, and that is a risk in some systems. I mean, I dearly love, as you know, the Warhammer 40k games. Well, particularly Rogue Trader, you're very much a one-trick pony, and that's while I love it, that's its slight drawback. You're completely inept at everything else. Whereas here, you could be not great, but you're not a complete numpty at things, and that's good in a detective thing that you've got. Everyone can play a part in most scenes.
Mm-hmm. That's it. The robust skill system, I think, is one of the things that makes PF2 because they've keyed up so the skill system effectively works the same and uses the same kind of mathematics as the combat system. It has lined up so there's a good infrastructure you can use to run a wide variety of things, and characters in this also are more often more skilled in more areas than, say, Pathfinder 1 or I think everyone or D&D 3.5. Like, one of the problems with that game is, especially if you use intelligence as a dump stat, your fighter would be good at one thing, right? Unless you were human, in which case you would be good at two things. And you would, unless you were wanting to minimize your character's, effectiveness, those would probably be put in one of those physical areas that they're going to be using pretty often. This allows you, with the background system and the broader selection, or the more generous skill system, to be better at more things.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say that the normal Golarion world where Pathfinder is set has already these niches where you have different technology levels, and all these stuff is baked into the system at the core. So it is possible to play that way. But it does not feel like we are playing the typical fantasy RPG. We're just playing this weird city, which is like I don't know, Victorian London or so, and then you have these fantasy characters within this working kind of city, and do not care about whether they're different species. Who does care, actually? So that works really, really well, and that has something to do with the system, but also with us and how we play that. So that's, I mean, I'd say, but yeah.
Definitely. Well, I think, like, Ingolf, I know you had experience with PF2 before, but Darren and James, had you guys played PF2 before the holiday sessions?
Well, we'd done that that Japanese one shot you did for me.
Yeah, right after it came out, yeah.
Yeah. But I think that must be the main. This must be the main PF2 experience. Up until Kingmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Christmas one was my first experience of the game, and I think the way we play it, like Ingolf was saying, the game doesn't get in the way because it is quite heavy role playing. I find the way we play it, and I think Pathfinder 2 sort of supports that, or it supports how you run games, you know, with the checks, and we've got our re-rolls, you know. So I think it lends well to the way that we've sort of played the game, really. Not saying that we don't use the system at all, because we do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get in the way. It sort of supports how we play rather than we're sort of playing the game and trying to fit role playing around it. It's more we're role playing, and the game just helps us occasionally when we need to do some randomization, as it were.
When you guys have, because at the time of recording, you guys have just reached 6th level. Have you made any advancements or decisions on changes to the characters since 1st level that have been related to those subsystems or the other things we've done as opposed to combat?
I've been trying to build into the things like being lead climber and lead stealth and things like that to try and do the group. Because again, you're trying to get the whole group through. So a bit into that. But
Yeah,
it's still nice to punch things in the face, right? You can never get away from that.
So, I mean, Basil has evolved into a thief at some point. So he uses a lot of thievery, but this was quite handy and still is. And the other thing is, so at the first levels, the investigator is not so useful in combat because you don't do so much damage, and you basically spend 2 actions for the first attack normally. But we saw in the one session when I was able to do all the crits that this will lead to massive damage later on. So this is really weird. So it's kind of a sharpshooter somewhere in this red.
What about you, Darren? Have you made any decisions for Dr. Osprong?
Yeah, I mean, he started out, or to me, he started out as, you know, your classic sort of Frankenstein monster, and I thought he was going to be more of a sort of sciencey engineer guy at first that dabbled in the healing to sort of help people. But the way that the story went, he just got heavily into the healing and the medicine, and I've driven it, you know, all the way through, that he's specialising more on that. He's got a little bit of tinkering with like some mechanical stuff and making things and inventory bit, but he's definitely turned into, you know, a healer, not just for the group but for the poor of the city, really. You know, he's become the poor champion, and then I've just supported him a little bit with sort of boosting Igor to be my sort of combatant if needed, really, and to help in those sort of situations. So yeah, he's definitely gone that way.
Well, I was saying, in our campaign, we talked about this in our Kingmaker game. Kingmaker is more of a bog standard. I don't mean in a pejorative way, but like it's a bog standard kind of sandboxy fantasy type of game, which is focused more on like going out into the wild and finding stuff and you know, building stuff, fighting monsters and shit like that. That game really suffered until we got kind of at least one person who was a dedicated healer, just because of the nature of the game. It also, there was another factor that every encounter they had was very difficult. But in this game, we've never, I think you guys have been challenged by combat encounters, but I've never had a combat encounter that you guys have had where I thought, Well, fuck. I really misjudged your capabilities in that. There were some tricky
I think
ones.
that Kelpie was pretty close there.
It was so good. That one was terrifying, but I think because I don't know, why do you guys think that one was so much more challenging than the others?
Yeah, there was this plan, and the plan was good, but we didn't stick to it.
You guys very briefly thought you were playing Shadowrun. It's like, okay, we got a plan, but let's do completely different from what we had planned.
But it was
Correct plan would have been to turn around in the park and leave.
Yeah.
it was just the lack of control. Well, that's what I felt. I didn't have control of the situation in any way because Basil just kept disappearing under the water. I think Sally went under, which you sort of expected, but weren't coming back up quite quick enough, and everyone just seemed to be like, and it was too dark, and we just lost control of the situation and just felt a bit helpless, and that's where I was struggling as like the healer almost.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that was a great. I think that was one of my favorite combat encounters I've run for PF2, only because the environment played such a huge role in, like, there wasn't necessarily a thing on the character sheet that was like, it had an ability that would interact with the environment, but the environment felt so present in the game or in the encounter more so than almost any other fight. Any fight on a battle mat is going to have some degree of like where the environment is playing into or playing a role in the encounter, but that one in particular just really felt different from when you have things on like as an example, when I used to run a ton of D&D fourth, before we ever had the channel, and the thing I really loved about that game was that I always also would be thinking about what's going to make the environment interesting, like what's going to make for an interesting set piece. So we had lots of like sinking ship that was tilting while people were being moved, or we had moving things in the environment, or we had fights on air cars or shit like that. And because the game had that tactical crunch to it, it gave reasons for making that environment feel like an interesting calculation in the game. That's the only time we've done that. I wouldn't want every encounter to be like that, where it's so obviously like a kind of a set piece type thing, but it really did make fighting underwater feel a lot more dangerous than I've felt it in many other games.
There was this other fight where we fought some kind of flying shadow or so, where Sally almost crashed to the ground. So there were some different encounters, which were all also. Let me say this was a relaxed interpretation of the fall damage rules. Otherwise,
otherwise it would have been really difficult. Falling in PF2 is extremely unforgiving. It's half the feet that you fall, you take in damage. And I think you guys were like third level or fourth level at the time, so that would have been a greasy spot that smelled vaguely of fish. So, but yeah, that's I mean the what do you call it? The combats in this, I feel like they haven't been, because we're more often than not running one. There are times where you're able to fight, but then you have lots of time in between. It has allowed me to really to run challenging and interesting, or at least hopefully interesting encounters without worrying that your healer's going to be overtaxed, or I need to worry about one person going down and then suddenly you guys are fucked. There are definitely games like that. The criticals is the only thing that what makes that unpredictable in this game, is that the criticals aren't as punishing as, like, say, Five Rings or Savage Worlds, where there's exploding dice and you're suddenly like, well, shit, I just got shot by a minion and I'm taking 35 points of damage, and how am I going to deal with this? But it's there's some big spikes in damage that happen in some of those encounters. Apart from the Kelpie encounter, is there any other fighty scene that stands out for you guys?
Well, people falling off trains is obviously a good one.
I don't think I was even in a combat encounter, was it? I was just like part of
No.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean,
just things go wrong, don't they, during interrogations?
Yeah. But there were two sessions. One to chase the person to the train, and the other one within the train, and they were both excellent. I mean, it didn't really progress the story so far, but it was just an excellent series of encounters which totally made sense for each person, and it was it was just great. So that was definitely fun, really fun.
Yeah, that was.
And
I think. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, I would just say so, but we need to ask Sean for that, because I think he would have a different point of view.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, moving away from the combat briefly because we're talking about it, that whole sort of storyline or those couple of sessions have probably been some of the most memorable and brought up the most, because I think that was the same one where we were racing across town and Golag couldn't get up a wall, to get to the train in the first place. So that keeps getting mentioned time after time. And then Sally throwing someone off the train. I'm sure.
Didn't throw them off.
I was
Well,
pushed
that's how
off.
I recall
Them
it.
off.
And I do remember me and Basil having quite good fun with the conductors and stuff during the whole incident as well. I just that is probably one of my sort of fondest moments from Paradise. Just those, because those couple of sessions just back to back that just really worked well for everybody. I thought everyone was fully engaged and yeah, loving it. But coming back to the combat, the only other combat that particularly stands out is just when the Doctor got attacked in his new residence or his new medical facility by the remnants of the what was his name? Oh, I've got all the names here somewhere.
Oh, Brother Loeb's
Brother
acolytes,
Loeb's
yeah.
sort of leftovers, or whatever you want to call them. And I did think there's a good chance that I'm not going to get through this, because he was on his own, and I thought he's not very good at this fighting thing. Igor was trying his best and failing miserably, and then the gang arrived and bailed me out. But that was quite an intense fight for.
I don't think there's been. It's just I can't let for the combat encounter design. But from the mechanics type, I don't feel like there's been unfair outcomes in the however long, a year and 5 months that we've been playing, where just like we've had cold dice sometimes, but and there's been difficult fights, but I don't feel like, well, I never had a chance in this. That's something that PF2 is really good for. At the time of recording, I'll say James just ran his first session of Pathfinder 2 as well today. And one of the things I really love about running the game is that it's very easy to figure out what's going to be a fair encounter from the starting point. The math is so tight on the game that you can rely on whatever difficulties they set or whatever the recommendation is for setting up the encounters. There will be, as always, situational things that will make things more difficult, like when Adam was facing those things on his own, or when the Kelpie was able to keep separating people from the group. Those are things that make those encounters harder. But, there's been in other games I've run, there has definitely been times where you're like, oh, God, like we just had either I fucked up and gave something too challenging, or just like the way that someone read the encounter. We had in our 1/5 edition thing where the players just sort of read the encounter wrong, or at least didn't read what my intention was for it, and it got so much fucking harder than what I intended. And I'm like, I think we might all die here, And I've never felt that in Pathfinder 2. I think actually, Ingolf, it was you played in that game. It was the one in Ravnica
where my Loxodon was supposed to flee, and he wanted to help someone fleeing as well.
It was the one with the fire spirit, and I can't remember, but like just everyone kind of went all over and was using different abilities. I'm like, oh my god, we're all gonna die here.
Yeah, that was nice. I'd say another thing. So I felt that, I mean, there were some encounters which maybe had a little bit of filling the session or so on, but most of the encounters really feel like they are meaningful to the stories, and not. I mean, there is. You will see the lesser minions attack in the way because you don't want to fight the evil one at the first encounter and so on. But it always feels like we are making progress. We are moving on. And so that's really great. I mean, sometimes when you do one of the official Pathfinder campaigns, there are those very, I mean, they're not random encounters because they are pre-written, but they don't really fit in there. There's just some, we need something from level here to get to this level, and we don't have that problem. And so we have all these wonderful encounters which mean something.
Well, that's just something that's someone had posted. I haven't replied to them yet, but posted on our recent Warhammer Fantasy session about comparing the Warhammer Fantasy to Pathfinder 2. And one of the things, if you look just at the adventure design for each of those things, PF2 and D&D are definitely story. They've advanced more. They're not like just modules where it's a grid with monster stats in it. But largely that's what they are. Like that's what the what's in the book is largely going to be a series of combat encounters and maps to fight on, because that's what in the rule books, that is what those rules are primarily concerned with. With Warhammer Fantasy things, I go back to the classic Enemy Within campaign. The instructions that they were given when they were writing it was write a D&D campaign as if it was for Call of Cthulhu, because Call of Cthulhu is more about the uncovering information and interacting, and there will be violence and monsters and whatnot in the course of that adventure. But all of those encounters are facilitating the story and facilitating whatever mystery you're uncovering. They are means to an end. They're not ends of themselves, which is kind of what the case is. It's not a wrong thing with that. Like there's neither a right or wrong way of it. It's just for this campaign, I intentionally designed it so that anytime there is violence in it, I'm hoping that there is a corollary. Like there's something that's coming in the story that that you get out of that. The violence happened for a reason, and you're probably going to be able to draw some conclusions for where things happen, even with unintended things. Like when Carl was still able to play, he had one encounter where he was like, some guy was spying on him, and he's like, "Fuck this guy," and chased him down and whatnot, and it resulted in a very brief combat encounter. But even that still had that kind of random, as close to a random encounter as we're likely to have in this game. That still had some contact, because I believe, was it the Whisker Network that guy was connected to? I can't even remember offhand if it was the Whisker.
No, he was spying for someone else. That was definitely the thing. Yeah. So we had to hide the body and so on.
Sean, if you are listening, go ahead and join late. Or someone wants to tell Sean in Discord he's welcome to join late if he's feeling up to it. He said he was sleeping in. Late is always better than never. I'm really glad to hear that, Ingo, because that's how the intent was for this, is to make sure that there was consequence. And the thing I think is a strength about the system is that you can make those consequential, tough one session fights where you're going to be going in with all of your stuff. Some games, 4th edition, I'll pick on one for this one. 4th edition was a game where, in order to have a satisfying boss encounter, you had to wear down the players. You had to wear down their resources in order to make it, just because the game was built that way. I've never felt that way with Pathfinder 2, that I need to run filler encounters in order to have a satisfying kind of, boss fight, as it were. The other thing with the system is I like that the reason I asked about whether you guys made decisions based on the non-combat stuff is because of that. Like I remember how present the outcomes in in those chases or the other subsystems or skill challenges that we've had, how much that has carried over into the story. And it's a great thing. It's a thing I love about the system, that it gives us an infrastructure in order to do that. We've got ways that you guys can participate in them. And like you say, James, because it's level based, you're not going to be a chump at it. Low level characters in 3rd edition and whatnot. Part of the problem with it's great that they had a skill system in that, but when your bonus is a +3, it doesn't mean an awful lot on a d20 roll. Whereas in this, I think it's like 5 or 6 is your starting bonus at 1st level. So there's a substantial enough swing in your rolls versus someone who's completely unskilled in it, and that gets bigger as you guys level up as well. Just because of once you're not able to add that training bonus in, that gulf between trained and untrained gets bigger as you get higher level.
Yeah, because I just checked out the character sheet, and looking at she has Sally. She's good at sneaking, good at punching things in the face, and talking as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a bit, in a murder mystery thing with a bit of things going on. You've got something to do in most scenes, and I think all of us have got things like that. And you're not just going, okay, well, this is a fight scene or this is a talk scene. I've got nothing I can do now. Yeah, and it really helps.
Oh, definitely, and I like that. The system it does another smart thing it does is not like gating certain things as suboptimal picks. Yeah, like in other games, or if you're picking something off your class or your profession or whatever else, it's going to cost you twice as much to get that. So there's less of an incentive to do that. PF2 doesn't give a shit. It just you do have from your class certain selections and certain decisions that are going to be gated by your class, but your background and some other things allow you to go much broader. So you can have those characters who are like, I want to play a paladin who's also a fucking thief. And you can do that with the combo of the class and the background, not even considering any kind of feat selections or anything like that.
Yeah.
One thing... Oh, go ahead, James.
Go ahead. And I think we've commented before out of some of the games as well, though, is that we just have some sessions where there's, in a way, not that much goes on. There's a load of talky and wandering about, and it all seems to go well. And I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I've got my own thing in my head about what Sally Dumaire really wants and what she's important to her, and it doesn't really come up, but it doesn't really matter much. In fact, it doesn't matter at all. I just have it in the back of my head because it's there. But there's no need to bring it in. But because of the way we have these chatty stories which go around, it can exist quite happily in there, and it goes quite well that way. You don't feel you got to have a big punch up every session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned on Discord before. I can happily sit here for sort of 2 hours just listening to Ingolf and James and Sean sort of developing their characters and doing their thing, knowing full well at some point I'll get some time. But even if I don't, I'll still quite happily sort of watch what's going on and watching the story developing. And that's the bit that I really like the most. Like I said, the role playing I think is really strong with this particular campaign, and I think that's what's kept me so interested. And I really feel connected to the characters, and I would hate it if any of the characters died. I'd hate it if my character died or any of the characters would die. I mean, I've thought about ideas for new characters.
Hold on, I need to make a change for next session. Just maybe make a note here. Okay. So go ahead, Darren.
No, but you can play games that it's like, oh yeah, I'll just roll up another fighter or whatever. But these characters, I think they've, like we said before, they really have come to life. And I think any of them went off the scene, I think they'd be quite big shoes to fill. and I don't know how long it would take to try and sort of build it up, all that character again, and fit a new person. Obviously, you could fit someone in it, but that's just how it feels to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've had that in our Night Below campaign. For those who may be following our Night Below campaign are not caught up in it right now, too, I am going to spoil something in a moment. So maybe if you're listening to this at another time, skip forward about a minute in the video. But one of Dave's character actually died in a recent session, and he's brought a new character in, and we're on hiatus for that game, playing our annual Star Wars adventure right now, so we're going to be coming back. But that's the thing he was facing was that there's this long-term, that campaign is a very different structure to it, so there's not quite as story focused or as character focused. The guys have done a great job of role-playing the characters with each other, but it isn't quite as inextricably tied up in what's unfolding in the plot, I guess, as it is in this game. This game is much more keenly connected to each of your individual characters, as opposed to just you guys are part of an ongoing story. So you're right. I think that there would be definitely some things that would fall by the wayside if we didn't have the connection to, Dr. not Ravencroft. I always get that wrong. Raycroft. That would be something that would, that's Adam's connection, in this. The Whisker Network is Basil's connection, and whatever the hell's going on with the Deep Dark Sea, or even what's her name, Daphne Lagrange. Unlikely we'd see that character again if Sally didn't have any, shuffled off her mortal coil.
Got him thinking about that now. I blame you.
Gotta do like a challenge. All right, let's see.
So, in a way, I think the character arcs are more emerging than planned. At least it feels this way. So they come up naturally where the story goes, in a way, and this is really, really great. So I mean, I had at one point the choice to choose some Underworld Connection feed, and then we imported the Whisker Network again, and so that's nice, but it wasn't planned before. So that
100%. It's a thing that's really as a game master, really, one of the rewarding things about the game is that the overall structure for like what we're doing as a primary quest stuff is on a mystery by mystery basis. There's constantly going to be stuff that's coming up in it, but within the context, that's where you guys are pushing the game into different areas and prioritizing different things, which gives me an opportunity to feed back in with information about your own individual characters and their kind of the story that surrounds them, or the broader mystery of Paridar itself, or whatever. Now before I forget it too, what you said, Darren, about being willing to sit back and watch the other players, that speaks a lot to all of you guys, because not everyone is willing to sit and watch other people play during it. If there are some players who want to be have their characters involved in everything, and sitting back for an hour and a half and watching while one thing is being chased down. We split the party all the fucking time in this game, but all of you are are generous enough with your time, and that you're paying attention to what's going on. You're letting other people have time in the spotlight, and that's, I think, for this kind of campaign that's going to be character focused, or has at least any kind of character focus. That's a really important consideration for the players. So that's not to, I always want to make sure that we're highlighting that point, that comes really in a big part from the players, a willingness to do that. No one's checking their phone. No one's, getting a browser up or whatnot. You're all engaged in whatever's going on at the table, even if the spotlight isn't on your character. So I've now stunned them into silence with praise. So make a save start of each round.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I really like about this game, and this is a weird tangent maybe. So sometimes Golak, who runs the company, isn't there. And it feels so real that the boss is nowhere to be found when there's real danger. And all the other ones have to.
There are mirrors to be admired. It's, there's only so many hours in the day of running a company and.
Exactly. Well, we've had a couple of players come and go from the game as well too, and unfortunately, like Mo started in this campaign. I have no doubt that he would have kept playing had he not gotten sick and passed away. But we had, I think there's like 9. Even if we look in the player roster, there's like 9 characters or something like that.
Yeah, there's 4 characters listed.
There was Hannibal, who was played by Carl.
Yeah.
And then we had Stitches. And
with John, and then
and
George played Matthias Ducard, and Mo played Lady Lillian. Yeah. And I think like this is another strength with this game. We run one war story in it, but when we've had only 2 players, we're still able to play this game for the most part. The only reason we didn't play the regular campaign that time was because it would have been Darren, you were on vacation, and it was sort of the culmination of that Patchwork Pauper mystery, which was largely focused on you. So for you not to be there for it, that would have really, I don't think you want to hear about that secondhand how that ended off. But it says a lot, and like one of the things that I love about running, I'm at the time of recording, we're now about 6 sessions into our Traveler game, and I ran a fair amount of Traveler about 3 years ago, or maybe a little more than that, and then we sort of stopped playing it for quite some time. And I hadn't thought about Engel, but like you're right that this is absolutely part of the thing I love about running Traveler is that so much of it is spent just inhabiting the world and interacting with the world, and that's something that I really enjoy as a game master, is having that. I'm always willing to let people, unless we're playing a one shot where we need to get to an end. I love taking whatever time we need to smell the roses and stuff. And for this kind of campaign, this is largely what you're doing in it, and that's, I think, with the way that you guys have played the characters and interacted with the world, that's allowed me to help flesh out more and more of that world.
I think in Paridar it's helped. We've joked about it before, but because you've never got to put in a map together, we don't know how big Paridar is, and you can just keep expanding and adding bits, and you can't go, oh, you can't put that there because the map stops there, or so it's actually helped, I think, to make it sort of like an endless city, that anything could happen and anything could be added, and we've never been to that part of town and this happens over there and this. So I think the normally I like a map and things like that, but I think in this game it's actually added something to it and left the freedom to be able to, for you to be able to sort of do what you want, basically.
It's interesting. I was thinking about that because it is like we don't have a map for the game, and often like that's one of the first things I draw. But I was thinking about it today, and one of the things, like as a North American, I have no earthly, and I don't mean this is all North Americans, but like I have no earthly idea what the layout of London is. I've been to London. I have no idea how the fuck I got around. I just knew what destinations was and what thing to catch, and that was it. But I have no idea where anything is in London in relation to one another. Ditto for most American cities, because I just don't know where the fuck anything is. I don't know how long it takes to get from, Staten Island to downtown Manhattan. But it doesn't really matter when I'm engaging with media, because unless the play of the game needs to have a map for some kind of game mechanic, I don't think it fucking matters. Like, it matters in the context of the story of how long it takes to get to certain things, but like I read a lot of Forbidden Lands last night, and like a core part of that gameplay is the map. You interact with the map, making decisions over where you're going, making decisions over how many resources you have, how long it takes to get to different places. All of that stuff is integral to the gameplay of that. How long it takes for you guys to get from your office to someone else's place, doesn't matter unless we're just saying how long it takes to set up some kind of skill challenge, you know. And it doesn't. I don't think it would add anything to the gameplay loop, like what we're doing when we're engaging with the game mechanics, by having that map there. You know?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm reading Absalom at the moment, and it's a really, really good book, and it's really well done, and it's huge, and it's got full of detail, and covers tons of stuff, and that gives you plot hooks and all the rest of it. But in a way, you end up with the whole thing a bit that everywhere's sort of covered, and you got to watch. For me, it's just a personal thing that you feel a bit constricted. You think, well, if I go over here, I'd better check that I'm not going to stumble over something that I'm. And of course, you can ignore it. That's just a me thing rather than there's a flaw in the product. It's doing exactly what it intends to do in a very good way.
Yeah.
But in a way, the fact that it's so undefined in here doesn't make it less real, but it's quite, as you say, liberating.
Yeah, and I
it can
don't
be
think
what it needs to be when it needs to be.
You're not wrong. I mean, I think it, like, your feeling on that is the same feeling I had with Absalom, is that it's an incredibly detailed city, but with a product that is as popular as what that is and the setting, when you're playing in any kind of established or pre-established setting, whether it's, you know, something that's coming from other media or whether it's something that's created for the world, the idea of stumbling across something and getting it wrong, like intentionally changing something is one thing, but with players who feel like, well, actually this, you know, I know that X, Y, Z is there. It's one of the reasons why I generally don't like running Forgotten Realms, because I'm not willing to put in the homework to make sure I don't stumble across those things and get shit wrong. That players who care about that setting will, it'll lessen their enjoyment of it, because they're like, well, that's not really how Elminster talks, or that's not really how, you know, things work in Baldur's Gate or whatever. That's not a criticism. That's just when you're playing in a setting that is that well defined by not only source books but by novels and other stuff. I think it's fair to worry as a game master that you might be stumbling over something that, you know, an expectation that players may have with respect to that setting.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So. Which
I would just add. So I'm running the how is it called, the Edgewatch.
Agents of Edgewatch.
This thing, and so it takes place in this once a deserted part of Absalom, where this kind of fair is going on, and then you go to random encounters within the city, and you end up reading up about this special area in the city and what's going on there, and maybe try to use that, but then you end up ignoring it altogether because no one can actually remember that. So I have this wonderful Absalom box, and it is great because you have all these gorgeous pictures of all the NPCs, and you can use them, and that is perfect. But the rest is too detailed unless you are looking for a specific story somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the players won't even notice normally. And
no, you know, one of the fun things with I don't run, at least like I don't run many games that are in full-on homebrew settings, at least no ongoing campaigns since our Ash game came to an end. But for this one, that's one of the liberating things, not only because you can free yourself from homework, but also because you can make shit important for the characters and for the campaign as much as you want. You know, like, I don't need to concern myself the way that game designers do about making sure that there's not just one special thing in a setting. We can do whatever we want, you know, with the stuff. If the richest guy in town, is subject to some kind of magical curse or whatnot, and you guys get involved with that stuff, I don't need to worry about ruining it for any other publisher, you know, things. That matters only for the purpose of this campaign and for what's happening to your characters. And that's a great fun. You can you can absolutely do that with any other thing too. But if you do go too far off script from what's in the official material, you do run the risk of running up against that, you know, the friction with players' expectations of things. Yeah. Like, I jokingly got, and I mentioned before, I got bored running the Tyranny of Dragons campaign right after 5th edition came out, and I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just have a fucking zombie plague? Like, I just, I'll you know, at the time, the Miracle, the god of the undead, was dead, murdered during some series of novels or some cataclysmic event. I was like, I'll let him come back, and then, like, this is what the whole campaign's about now, is you guys dealing with a plague of undeath, and that's it. And one of our players in that game is a huge Forgotten Realms fanatic. Like, you know, he fell behind reading the novels when he had kids, but he had read everything, so, like, that was part of the reason why he loved that game. And that would have completely torpedoed his enjoyment, or at least a good part of the reason he's playing in there, to do the theme park thing of going and, like, seeing Baldur's Gate and seeing Neverwinter and seeing the Emerald Enclave or whatever, you know, that he was going to bop up and down the Sword Coast. Whereas in Paridar, there's no wrong for this. So, you know, whatever we choose to do, whatever we choose to, you know, to change fundamentally about the setting, doesn't matter, because it's always correct for our game.
Yeah, but it is still a theme park. I mean, I would go so far to say that the real protagonist, in a way, is in a way the town, like in Cyberpunk, where you have Night City doing all the and here we have all these stories around the characters, but it is all connected to the town, and it has this emergent story design, and that's very fitting. It works.
One of the my favorite comments, Carl, in one of the early sessions we played, and I can't remember what the event was that happened, but something happened, and his comment was, "Oh, this fucking city." And I was like, "Okay, we're getting this down pat." That's the reaction I want for the players. Like, whoa, oh, look at this.
He wasn't going to have his waistcoats being bad-mouthed.
Exactly. Let me repost the link here for him.
It's probably the comment about the wall that probably stirred him, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Sean, welcome.
Hey.
How are you doing?
So, you know, I'm better now.
Okay, good. Yeah,
sorry, guys.
Sean, no problem. It's great you're able to join.
Overslept.
Late is always better than never. Let me see. So do you see yourself in Roll20?
No, I'm still, let me see. Still.
And are you in Firefox or are you in Chrome?
I am in Chrome.
Oh, so that'll be, yeah, Firefox is, this week, Firefox is the one that works.
All right, yeah. Let's see.
But we can hear you.
Oh yeah, there's video coming.
Gotcha. Yep, gotcha.
Success.
Perfect. So, guys, what do we touch on thus far that Sean may want to weigh on? I guess one of the things is Sean, had you played much Pathfinder 2 before we started this campaign?
Let's see. The bulk of it was probably the. I want to say it was the marathon that I played. Was that Pathfinder?
That was Savage Pathfinder, actually.
Oh, it was Savage Pathfinder.
Yeah, you played a ton in that one.
Yeah. So I'm wrong about that. Let me think about this. I definitely played it. You know, and I want to say, you know what? The very first time I played it was James and I played Samurai like years ago.
Yeah, right after the game came out. That's right.
Yeah. There was that, and then you know, a smattering. I'll go with the smattering as the official measuring stick there. But not much. Not like this.
One of the things we talked about in our first bit of this was the ways that PF2 supported the story that we've been telling over the last, 16 or 17 months. What are your thoughts on? I know you play a lot of games as well. What are your thoughts on ways that PF2 has really aligned with the, what the experience has been in this campaign?
Let's see here. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just, I think, I don't know if it's specific to Paridar, but it was a good, clever decision, and I don't have any comparison to PF1 because I may have played that once years ago, but the 3 action points I think are a clever, good decision that it's not complicated, and yet you're always thinking, like, it's never It's just really never, take your swing and then next. It's you got to decide what to do with those points. And with a regular attack being only one action, a physical attack, being one action, that leaves you 2 more. So you got stuff to do. Like, there's things going on. And magic is 2, that still leaves you 1 more, typically, and that leaves you 1 more. So there's always decisions to make there. So I think that's accolades are called for with that. Just that 3-point action point mechanic is strong. With the rest, I think it's flexible. Plays what you want to play. The magic is gives you a lot to chew on. From my character's perspective, there's a lot of ability to skin things however you want. Because I was really since we just leveled up, I was just looking at going through it all again, and there's a lot you can do no matter how you want to play, what world you want to play in.
Well, excuse me, something we were talking about earlier, that it's unusual to have a campaign with pre-gens that has gone this long.
Oh yeah,
right. So
yeah, true. Yeah, and a big part. I've forgotten there were pre-gens. Yeah, right.
Well, it's because you guys have made the characters so clearly your own, setting aside the decisions you make over levels, like the way you chose to play these characters has completely, stamped on them. And it reminded me of something else, actually, when I ran this, or when I made all the pre-gens for this, I had intentionally wanted to go with classes we had not seen at the table thus far, and with ancestries we had not seen. It was an intentional decision to not play the elf, dwarf, halfling, kind of makeup that you made. I intentionally wanted to have oddball classes and oddball ancestries with it, which led to, an investigator and we had a magus and an engineer, a sorcerer, which we had people. Oh no, you're playing a witch and a sorcerer. We hadn't seen a witch at the table yet, so that was another thing that you playing non-standard ancestries and then just going with it it was one thing that I intentionally wanted to have a very different makeup of the different ancestries. But again, like, you guys really leaned into each of them, and it's in a custom setting, dovetailing with what we were just talking about. It's great to be able to say, like, Adam's the only one. Dampiers only came from the vampiric virus. That's where, what their connection was. And Sally is the only, benthic, Azarketi. Yeah, that you're going to see in the campaign. It's great to be able to have those unique characters, but not rob them of their, individuality or their specialty, right?
Yep.
I think there's a lesson there of sometimes I generally don't really fucking care, but I mean, there's sometimes a resistance to letting characters play really oddball characters, oddball ancestries, right? And every campaign's gonna be different, so sometimes there really genuinely will not be a right fit for it. But I think that this is an example of us playing a pretty bog standard mystery detective, campaign, but you guys all playing very unique and unusual characters, as well as a atypical party makeup. No fighters, no clerics, no magic users. Like, everyone is a little, a little off center, I guess.
Yeah.
One thing,
true.
I was going to say, I think I've said to you before, this Pathfinder is really not my typical game, and being a complete oddball, slightly gonzo, but everything, all the rest of it is totally not me. You know me. Mithras, historical, prosaic, Dollars Ditchwater, blah blah. But it just goes to show you shouldn't just say that you've got your one thing. And I go to, like Sean said, I'm really going to think that Pathfinder is very good at what it does, and you can enjoy it for what it does, and you can branch into something new and enjoy it for what it is. And you don't have to stick with your one thing. So
Yeah.
it's, I branched out from where I was, a couple of years ago into a completely different genre and completely different system.
And you
it
ran your
worked
first
because
one
it
today
works.
too. And you ran your first game of it today too, which is awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But you can enjoy it. There are new horizons to be had on these things if you try something and just go for it.
Yeah, and getting back to the question that that viewer had asked about, comparing Warhammer and PF2, like, well, I'm going to be responding to that person directly, but I think it really comes down to right tool for right job, right? Like, it's a matter of both games are outstanding, and it's just a matter of what are you trying to do with the game, I was last night reading the source book for Twilight Imperium. I've got it here because I'm fucking reading it, but it's the Genesis source book for it, and like I am running currently Savage Star Wars, and I'm running Traveler, second edition from Mongoose. Both are very sci-fi games, but this would just be something different. Like, this would offer a very different kind of sci-fi experience. So I wouldn't use this to replace either of those games, but I think that it's a great game in and of itself. So finding the thing you can do with that, with those set of tools. And PF2 just happens to have a lot of tools in its toolkit. There's a lot of different types of ways you can still keep playing the game, in the sense of, like, you're interacting with the game mechanics in this game in a lot of different parts of the story that you can't do with a lot of other like D&D style fantasy RPGs.
Yeah.
And it's a funny combination of setting and system. It's like, I think the FFG Warhammer 40k system has got many flaws, but does it work in the setting? Oh yes, very well. And I'm not sure I would swap that system out for something else. And just as here, the system works very well with the setting and what we're trying to do.
One thing that Darren had said too, Sean, is how much the play, like you guys interacting with one another in character, has really led to the enjoyment of the campaign. And for myself as a DM, it's for what do you call shop steward. It's definitely one of the things that's been rewarding, is seeing you guys interact with one another in character, seeing how you guys are responding, even if, and from what Darren said, like, even if you're not in the scene, it's great seeing how the other characters are interacting with one another or responding to stuff that's happening in the setting.
Yeah. It's I think this has offered us an ability to play a very, a premise that I think is probably, I don't know about often talked about, but definitely comes up. But that notion of an investigative shop, and you all belong to it, and cases come in, and it'll come up, but do you actually do it? And I think it's been fun, especially at this length, to have, and then to have it have some background to it, like Golag's father and Basil's network, and stuff like this, and then the good doctors' clinics and where they're located and all that kind of thing, has given us time to really stretch our legs with the whole idea and in various directions.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we talked about too was the lack of a map in the game, and how that has been. My 2 cents was that it's I've been to London, I've been around London, but I couldn't tell you where anything fucking is. I couldn't look at a map and be like, oh, that's London. But any media that I enjoy with it, I don't feel like it's not in London. And in this one, the map is not an integral part of the gameplay loop. So it really doesn't matter where things are. No decisions that you guys are making are based on, like, how long will it get for me to go from Parliament or the Collingwood University to the Poverty Pond. That's not a factor that really ever matters, because unless something is coming up that will be dealt with by way of a subsystem or a skill challenge or a combat encounter potentially, doesn't matter for the purpose of your decisions that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
You have any comment on that, or the lack of a map, or the?
I mean, you get used to whatever. It seems. I think it's worked, and Yeah, and the thought that came to my mind on your comments right there, Kevin, is that the travel distances take as long as the plot, the plot calls for. Yeah, you get used to. I hadn't even. It's funny because when you say that, I hadn't even thought about it. So that just shows you get used to like, okay, we're gonna do it like this, and it's worked well. And on the other hand, if you'd done it differently, we'd have okay, we'll swing with that. And if it was based on a map, let's say similar to. You'd mentioned Warhammer Fantasy recently. Warhammer Fantasy 4th in the starter set has that map, and Uberstrike, and it's really fundamental because of just the way that works. That starter set works. That's the other way to go. And if we'd have done that, that'd have been fine. But this was good. I mean, I in fact, yeah, like I said, when you just mentioned it, I didn't even. Oh yeah, we don't have a map, do we? We just kind of yeah.
But I think it's even the other way around. So if we had a map, we would try to use it, and that would hamper the game. Because we then, I don't know. So because we did not know how far away the clinic is or where's Dr. Raycroft and so on. So we will get there. It doesn't matter. It's just, so the currency seems to be one afternoon. So everything is handled in one afternoon, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. So if we had to, so as far as I know, there are 2 rivers in Paridar without a name, and
they have names. So, I wrote them down, but I've never actually gone beyond that.
Yeah, yeah, but so Basil can't remember those details and just
totally. Well, I mean, you guys are spending so much time in the more destitute districts or the very affluent districts, right? So, but the other thing is something came up in our session on Friday. Sean, we were talking about any fact pattern or any fucking day job, any story or whatever else is going to have. If it's a fiction, there's going to be phrase around the edges. There's going to be things where it just doesn't make sense because it's made up, right? Like there's just inevitably going to be some things of, like, no one thinks too terribly hard about the fact that there's kind of slavery in Star Wars because of sentient robots. It's a fray at the edge, and if you pick at it, it's going to make, it'll cause problems, but it's a fictitious world that was never intended to be fully cohesive. And if you pick at you can choose to pick at the edges of things or just focus on whatever the story is actually about. For instance, we never did a map of here's all where the fires were in Paridar for it. And I thought briefly about doing that. I'm like, you know what? It's just going to cause it's going to cause problems for me more than what it's going to add to the game. Because if you pick at those things, I need to think out all those areas. And if at the end of the day, all you need to know is that there's been a bunch of fires across the city at seemingly unconnected locations, that's sufficient because that's the conclusion you're drawing from it. We don't need to flesh out more. And I think that in that case, that's where less is kind of better for these types of settings, because you can focus the adventure or the story or the mystery or whatever on whatever's important, which is who's causing this, not, well, maybe I can take a look at this thing and draw some kind of conclusion from it.
There is this Brindlewood Bay Mysteries RPG where you literally play Murder, She Wrote, basically. And and the idea there is that even the GM does not know who really did it. It is decided in a way within the story by the players, and then there's a dice roll if that person really was guilty or not. Because in the end, you have this final reveal where all the suspects are gathered, and then you have your argumentation, and then you make a roll, and well, you get them or not.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're at we're already at our midway point. We had said before you got on, Sean, well, we're not sure if we're going to go the full session. Foolish of me with how much we all like to talk. Why don't we take our mid-session break right now? I'm going to refresh my coffee. Everyone can refill their beverages. And then we'll come back and talk about, can carry on with things. So back momentarily. All right. Hey, everybody. Fred, Darren. Oh, Darren. Fred and Walter. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kev.
Oh, my goodness. I left my my door open to the backyard. I said it's so nice. Couldn't find my dog, and she is curled up in one of the deck chairs, completely asleep. I envy that. I believe I have a hot date with that later today.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So when we took our break, Ingolf, you just comment. I got distracted by the dog. I apologize. What was the last thing you said?
Yeah, I was talking about that. There's this game called Rindlewood Bay Mysteries or something like that. It's a powered by the Apocalypse game. Doesn't matter, but what matters is that the mystery is basically at the heart of the game, and you don't know who did it or what the mystery really was. For the GM, there are clues, and each person could be guilty, and then you have this reveal at the end where it is decided by dice roll if that person, the party agrees who did it, really did it or not. And that's interesting because even as a GM, you have to find out still whether this was true. And yeah.
Well, that's something, Sean, the reason we're talking about Murder, She Wrote, because I mentioned that it's Mother's Day in North America today. And I was telling my mom earlier that we were having our, year and a half retrospective. And I mentioned that part of the reason Paridar is the way it is because of watching Murder, She Wrote with her every day when I'm visiting back home. Because the thing about that show, there's a lot of remarkable things about that show, particularly how she helps support older actors to keep their health insurance and stuff like that current. But also it's writers like Michael J. Straczynski cut their teeth on that show and learned how to, in a 45-minute episode, introduce characters, introduce a problem, resolve the problem, and make it a satisfying viewing, or at least attempt to do so. And that's what one of the goals of this game was to continually have these, these discrete mysteries, but that also that would, for this campaign, have elements that would carry forward and would shape the characters and the setting and the campaign and whatnot over time. But what's interesting to say that too, Ingolf, because one of the things I've been thinking of lately that I recognize with how I approach adventure design for this one is I read an interview with Tracy Hickman when he was talking about the Dragonlance, the design of those ones, and like the way that he doesn't design an adventure and then run that adventure through and then make changes. He has a rough idea of like, okay, there's this, that, and then see how things play at the table. I'm like, oh, that was cool the way that played out. I'm going to make sure I incorporate that into the written version. And I wonder, as an aside, I wonder how much of that is the way that other modules like that are written, where you have a rough idea, but then it's the experience at the table that shapes what ends up being your final version of the module. And also, like, that's something that has really informed how we play here, is that I have an idea of what will happen, and sometimes I'll have combat encounters if I anticipate there's going to be violence prepared. But even when I don't have that stuff prepared, it's very easy to go where you guys choose to go. Like the chase you guys mentioned before you came on, Sean, the guys were mentioning the chase through the streets of Paridar to get to the train, and then the subsequent session of adventure on the train. None of that shit was scripted. Like, that was all stuff of you guys going where you want to go.
Yeah, that was good. And the torn trousers, the infamous
torn trousers. Yeah,
torn trousers. that caused Golag to join a climbing and swimming club in the city of Paridar, mechanically supported by a feet.
Well, that's one of the questions I asked the guys was whether they made any decisions on like leveling up their characters that were based on non-combat, like the non-combat parts of the game, and that answers that for me, because you haven't used climbing or whatnot in any of your any of your combat encounters, I don't think, but it's the non-combat stuff where we're interacting with the game mechanics where you did have those challenges.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't resist. There was there it was. I thought, yeah, we'll go ahead and take that. That offers climbing and swimming benefit, and absolutely.
So if we look back.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sean. I talked plenty.
I was gonna say, and then I thought I was gonna put a mention in for. I think the familiar has been fun. I was looking at the familiar rules. I was ridiculously unprepared for that familiar for I don't know how long we played, and I still wasn't quite sure. The details around familiars. I don't know why. Somehow it just escaped me. I was super deep dive on the spells and things because it's natural. So you got a magic user and you got to figure out how that works. And Pathfinder, it's got a few rules to it. You got to get that going. And the familiar just got away from me. I mean, it wasn't really necessary. How about that? That's one reason. It wasn't entirely 100% necessary for me to know every bit. Yeah. But I was just reading the familiar rules the other night and thought, my gosh, how did I not just thoroughly go through this like a year ago? But yeah.
I think it says, for one, it says a lot about the game that you can completely ignore that part of it and still have, a satisfying play experience. But I think there are always going to be, I have run, I think like 5 editions of Shadowrun at one point or another. Gun to my head, I could not tell you how decking or hacking works in any of them. Because I just always write the adventure so I never have to deal with that shit. I have it in NPC and whatever else, so just, there's always going to be parts of the thing where like, nope, I'm not going to learn this shit.
Yeah, it's a good point that, the necessity, because when I had put off the animate dead spell for quite a while, until it was able to be heightened to a level that I thought it was more interesting because, of course, there's always competition in those spell slots. So it hadn't actually made it, in the great competition of Golag spell slots to get prepared. And then it got heightened to level 3, which made it kind of interesting. I animated that first dead. I think it was a skin shred, something like that. And then we were. You may recall we were wondering, like, okay, so what can he do with it? And we actually, I think, had to look it up about that. It takes 1 action of Golags to give it 2 actions.
Yeah.
And it struck me how at the time that made me feel particularly chagrined because I realized I suspected that, okay, I mean, I have a familiar. How do I not know this? It's got to be the same rule. And I've had a familiar for like 18 months now or something. And how is it possible that I'm making the GM look this up? And so I felt remiss then too that like, oh my goodness, like, but anyway, but it's got good rules for it and stuff, and I'm so much happier to have read it. I like reading that stuff, and somehow it got away from me. But to your point about the necessity of it, and so suddenly with the Animate Dead, I had to know. It became up a little more because it was used in combat, and the shadow's not used in combat, or not typically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the shadow is a little more sneaky and gathering information. Almost always outside of combat, so it's not utterly critical of an action by action, turn by turn. Whereas the Animate Dead was, because it's in combat, so everyone's got to know. It's very discreet. It's very specific. What do we got here, folks? And so that suddenly brought to the fore those mechanics.
When I have in past, I have been really either reluctant to allow players to take on like summoning heavy characters, or I have been leery of like pet-based classes because they're often not implemented terribly well, or they just chew up so much time at the table, especially for summoning stuff. But in this game, and we haven't seen necessarily the when you're summoning more than one creature for it, but like seeing how the presence that Igor has where he's there, but really more often than not, he's only adding 1 extra action to Darren's round. It doesn't feel like it's taking up too much time or chewing anything up. It feels like that character is a core part of the character class without it taking, without it becoming a like, okay, let's sit back and have Darren take his turn. That's going to take as long as everyone else's collectively because he's got so many things on the table. It's a smart decision to have that you have to give up some of your actions in order to get to like purchase the actions from the other. It really makes the I'd be very interested to see how a ranger with a pet or a druid with a pet would play in this game, because I feel it's much better balanced than it has been in some other editions.
Yeah, the preparation is big. The fact that that the doctors, I don't know, not familiar, but construct, would that be correct? That its construct is always there, and so it's it's got a token. I mean, he's very Darren's very familiar how it works. Like, that preparation is big, because the problem I think sometimes with a magic user that suddenly summons a dozen skeletons is the notion of, if you are using a map, okay, where's the tokens? The specific rule, the unfamiliarity, can sometimes be a little bit of it's okay, but it can take a little extra time. Whereas for us, and I know, Kevin, you obviously immediately caused put some potential of Golag's summonings, in the in the journal in there. So that makes a difference. He hasn't done it much, but it makes a difference, because right in the middle of combat, you don't have to necessarily, okay, everybody, take 5. We got to get these things on the map and blah blah blah.
Want to put it back on you guys as well, like the preparation that Darren and Sean, that you guys have for your characters too. Like that means we're not slowing down while you're like, okay, what do these things do again? What do they, whatever. Like that level of preparation is what allows us to incorporate those more complex parts of the game without it slowing down to a crawl while we wait for you to figure out how to do things. That's usually my job, right? How does this work again?
Yeah. And then maybe a side mention on the character sheet. Character sheet, is a good sheet, and so it helps. More likely than not, you can click on something and it throws it into the chat so we can all read it together. Not always, but strong majority of the time, it's already in the sheet. The rules are, at least a brief summation of the rules are in the sheet, and you can just throw it into the chat and we all find out together, or get reminded, together of how that works. Which is really big for spells, obviously, because they're relatively complex, but don't come up constantly. A given spell, maybe like your go-to spell does, but like, what does that do again? And of course, a decent sheet like this it throws it into the chat. We all immediately see the little blurb of rules, and it's all good. Everything flows.
So for the characters we had, there's complexity to the monk and there's complexity to the witch as well. But I think the investigator and the engineer are a little more it's a little less directly obvious what is great about those classes. Like Ingolf, you got experience with PF2 before playing this as well. But how was it playing something that was a more atypical class from the get-go, and Darren coming into the game for the first time playing such an unusual class?
Yeah, one could say that we don't play. So normally, the investigator has some kind of feats that we never use. So so some bonus for collecting evidence where it takes less time than the normal downtime action would take, and so on.
What I do though is you always get where you notice something extra.
Yes. No, I don't think I wasn't trying to complain, but I was. No. Yeah. So the class has certain feats that are not coming up in our game because we don't play with this minutia where you have to keep track of time for each action and so on. So all this does not matter so much. And what happens is this kind of precision damage ability, and the idea that you can easier find clues and maybe are more familiar with this criminal minds and so on, and that works great. And I'm not even I don't strive for my character to excel in combat or magic or whatever. He is this kind of small rat and tries to be there if necessary, but he's not there for fighting actually. So and that works great, I suppose. But he can do something if necessary.
Yeah, he's had some good shots in the past, I think. Some pistol shots that have been...
Yes, this is precision damage. So if I can score a critical hit, then it will be really, really bad. So that...
Yeah. What about you, Darren, for tackling the engineer as or inventor as your first class?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite a fan of playing, I guess you'd call him a sort of support character. Not like a frontline like fighter or big damage deal or anything like that. I'm quite a fan of playing a sort of support character. So the sort of in between combats and in between scenes, creating things, patching people up, all of that thing, all those sort of things sort of came sort of natural to other characters I've played. And it did mean that I didn't have to sort of learn the rules quite as quickly because it was sort of a bit more in downtime and things. So when the combats came about, it was normally, you know, I'd learn how to use Igor, sort of send him in and try and soak up a bit of damage or distract whatever it was we were fighting, and then trying to keep people alive. You know, that was always Adam's front of his mind was, you know, who's taking damage, who needs patching up and keeping everyone alive, even if that means that he sort of plays a sort of temporary tank and sort of takes the front line himself and, you know, puts himself in the line of danger instead of everybody else. That's another way of keeping everyone alive, you know. So that was where he sort of focuses. You know, he's got a big heart. So that's how I've tried to play him. So I found that learning the rules, like I said, because there's a lot of role playing in that, and when the mechanics come up occasionally, it helps you to learn because we're only bringing them up bit by bit and slowly, rather than, you know, very rules heavy all the time. So I think the way that we play it has helped for me to get into the game and learn the game, and between games read a few rules and leveling up and all that sort of stuff. So it's a sort of gentle introduction to Pathfinder 2.
So is there anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention something which is not really related to the rules at all. So with Powered by the Apocalypse, there's this notion that you should be a fan of your players as a game master. And so I think here, at least, and I think that holds for all of us, I think I'm fan of all the characters there are. So I want to know what happens with Golak and why he's maybe cursed by that painting, or not. Well, we will see. And so I could hear Sally talking to her friend for hours without any serious exchange of information in the progress. and that's great. I mean, that's making everything alive in a way.
And that is that again goes back to, just to put a point on what you're saying, that it's the players. Like, you guys are the ones who definitely, I can, you know, do silly voices for my NPCs as much as I want, but it's what you guys bring to the table for your characters that really makes the other players invest in that and be, you know, and care about what, you know, what's going on with them. And for me also, it that means a lot. That helps me figure out how to structure, or how to at least present stuff or introduce things that specifically relate to those characters. Like, I've been sitting since, I think, last summer on the introduction of Adam's sister. You know, I've had that idea out there and slowly been, because it's since the Fire and Brimstone mystery is where I've known that she's out there, and I've known that I wanted to introduce it, and we've just been waiting ever since that woman's footprint was introduced. You know, and the fun thing with this, again, just from a game master's perspective, I am very, very, very impatient with many things, games that take too long. Sean and I have talked about this before, and I like your way of describing as latency between like when you're making your decision to take an action and when you find the outcome at the end of the mechanics. I very much prefer a short latency in most of my games because I lose patience. But one of the few ways where I am patient is in long-term campaign design. I am totally happy to put something out there and not touch it, not like, hey, guys, and just let it sit there for years and then come back to it at a later point. And that's something that's been really great about this game is we've had so many things on the go that it's been fun to seed things in with the idea of like this might mean something later. And making it shifting what that is necessarily going to be based on what's happening in the game and what I've learned about the characters too. That has come from from seeing how you guys have been playing your characters. Which is to say, like, I've learned how to torture you. So basically, I guess I'm the Church of Scientology. I'm just learning things by your gameplay, and I can use against you later. Please don't sue us, Scientology. That was a joke. Let's just make that clear for the purpose of defamation. That was a joke. There's no truth intended for that.
Yeah. Satire, people. Satire.
Yeah, exactly. What was I going to say? Or something
Send
you guys...
you for measurement.
Sorry?
I think we're going to have to send you for your measurement as to what level
yeah,
you're
my
at.
e-meter testing.
Yeah.
So here we can focus on the characters you guys have met in there. I'm interested in hearing who is your favorite NPC that you have met in the sense that your character likes interacting with them and you've enjoyed, the whatever, and your least favorite NPC in the sense of, okay, so I guess like favorite friendly NPC and favorite enemy that you've encountered over the course of our campaign.
Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, for Basil, it is maybe easy. There's Annabelle Carrington, who is the standard source of information and also the standard idea to put information to get something written or something done. And then there is the infamous, how was he just called?
Henri?
Yeah, how was he? Oh no, I don't remember the name, but yeah, I could.
Is it? I think it's Henri Ducard.
No, Henri Ducard isn't that?
Hannibal Ducard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's. I think Henri was the second name, or wasn't it? But the basically the Moriarty guy who is not. Named after the actor.
It's. I've got him. Let's see here. I've got our Faces of Paridar open.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Sir Henri Daniel.
Henri Daniel.
Right.
I'll put in a couple mentions for Sylvan. Sylvan deserves some. Like that minor. He's a good, interesting one to include because, of course, he's not titular in any way. He's not exactly, utterly required in any given scene. But you have a good time with him. He's always around. He gets his little FaceTime. And then the other one is Skeldug. I think Skeldug's fun because he's the bridge. My father's maybe been on scene, once. Once for sure. Maybe twice. I think it's once. So Skeldug's really the character. Skeldug's kind of a stand-in a sense. He's the bridge. When Skeldug's in play, who's then it really brings Golag's background is really at the forefront, in Skeldug. So and then we go to an orc bar and it kind of flavors up Golag. It goes into Golag's stuff. So I think those are.
I think there's definitely a chance where you're seeing a part of Golag that we do not see otherwise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a lot there. I mean, like, for example, like I think as you mentioned a minute ago, Kevin, with Darren's character, it's kind of been fun to really get into his character's background, like what's going on there, like with his construct and how he's put together and all that stuff, really getting into that. And Golag's got a lot of that going on, where he's still got some stuff back there. Like, not only he's got kind of a twofer. He's got his father, and we've definitely gone into his father some, for sure. Like, his father's been behind some machinations, and so that's been explored some. But the other one is his patron. So his patron is a mystery. There's a lot of meat on that bone, where he doesn't know. It's kind of crazy that he doesn't know who his patron is. Like, he doesn't actually know who that is, and why, the who and the why, and why his patron's doing that, because it's total choice. Like, it isn't an act of God, as it were. It's not random. His patron said, his patron decided to do this for a reason. So, and Golag doesn't really know why. So it's interesting that it, kind of like the good doctor who didn't really know of his, how did this happen? Golag's like that too, from a strong standpoint. Golag knows everything. It's basically his father plus his patron, and he knows about his father, but the patron's still mysterious. And so it's fun. It's interesting because it's anything's possible because we don't know.
Mm-hmm. What's you, James and Darren? Any thought NPCs that stood out, friendly or otherwise?
I guess Sally Jumeir likes Annabelle Carrington, up there, career lady, and Dr. Elizabeth Green is sinister as hell.
From the what do you call it? The Medical Corps, 9th Medical Corps.
Unit 731, as we call it.
So for me, he didn't play a massive part in it, but I like Father Hezekiah, because I think him and Adam saw eye to eye, sort of no nonsense, let's just get it done, whatever he wanted to get done and what Adam wanted to get done, and they seem to sort of connect on that sort of level, that no nonsense, let's just get on with the job.
And hands down, one of my favorite voices to do too. Fucking love doing that old man voice.
Yeah. And then the other character, the obvious one, was Dr. Raycroft, mainly because of his massive connection with Adam, but took a bit of a strange twist in the last session that has actually got Adam thinking that, why has he disappeared, and was he somehow related to, like, the creation of Adam? Because his sister, he don't trust his sister for a second, and all the rubbish he talked in the last session, trying to convince him to turn to the dark side almost, but has she actually uncovered a bit of truth that old Raycroft may have been the hand that created some of the people? You don't trust her, but she could have a bit of truth there. So now he's not quite sure about the Dr. Raycroft, so he's even more interesting now as an NPC until he finds him again, or hopefully finds him again. He'll never know, and that could be future mysteries to come. So he's always been an interesting character, but even more so now because he's not even sure if he's friend or foe in some ways. So very deep and intriguing character.
I mean, there should be some honorable mentions. I mean, there is this Professor Galberry. That is certainly a remarkable character. I
was going to mention that too. The whole university, building on that, the university spoken wheel a little bit it's been fun. That there's various professors, they know each other, and they're usually on our side and are always on our side. And to your point, Basil. But even Ingolf, even the whole package, of but Galberry is like front and center, but the package of professors,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the other one I liked was the monster hunter, Sir Archibald Morgan, and his desperate tries to get more in contact with Sally, who
Yes.
yeah.
Well, if you're going to bring him up, then I think we've got to bring up Vesta King then, and her obsession with Golag. Still unresolved.
There are no unproblematic romances in Paridar.
Right. Yeah, that was an unexpected, fun little interlude that feels like it could go farther.
Interlude suggests you think it's over, my friend.
Well, we'll see when you're upstairs and you see where that portrait is. We'll see. See what that holds.
So what about Sally? What about your villain? Who is your favorite unfriendly NPC?
Oh well, I had Dr. Elizabeth Green down as
Oh
unfriendly.
yes, yeah.
I'm not sure she's meant to be on our side, but I'm not trusting her as far as I can kick her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think she's like the smoking guy in the X-Files. So you don't really know, but she has some knowledge, and we need that from time to time, I suppose.
I'm watching the X-Files at the moment, and you do not want the cancer man on your side.
Right. That's funny. Yeah, and then if I haven't, I don't know if I think I skirted around with Skulldug, but my father is, I'll throw him in there, that as an NPC out there that's, I mean, he's certainly not a villain, but he skirts the edges. I think it's fun. I felt the same way about the Father Ezekiel, that he acts like a villain, but is, kind of, but is not. His gruff behavior, has kind of overlaps into what you'd think a villain might, or at least a low level, some kind of villainish. And my father's like that too. My father's got he's got goals that are his own. He's not gonna, I think Golag's he's not gonna outright throw me under the bus, but he's got his own agenda that he's gonna say, look, he's probably gonna give me a heads up as the steamroller's approaching. That's kind of the the family dynamic.
Yeah, because that's the only time we saw him on camera, as it were, was near the end of the Fire and Brimstone mystery.
Yeah, which is cool because he's also a bit of a bridge to upper society for me, which is a big thing for Golag. I mean, because he operates in the upper circles, and so it was his involvement that also was brought in the security services that I think was a first. Like the city's official secret service.
Ministry of Internal Security, yeah.
Right.
The man from
kind of
Miss.
Right. So it's kind of his level of things. He's not, my father's not going to be necessarily going to be involved with a gang of, ruffians that are, looking into a gang of ruffians that are stealing purses on the corner over there. He's more Ministry of Security level of, of machinations and backdoor dealings.
Yeah. Oh, so I was just writing down something before I forget.
Yeah, just because I noted, has anyone ever realized that the nurse in Adam's clinic and Dr. Green have the same name, exactly the same name? That is suspicious.
Does she?
Yeah, they're both called Elizabeth Green.
Let's see.
Have they been in the same room at the same time? I'll ask the question.
Yeah, Betty Green. And Dr. Elizabeth Green.
Dun, dun, dun.
Say Betty, yeah. I didn't know her.
Yeah, well,
surname.
Betty is full human, and Dr. Green, I can't remember if she's half elf or
yes, yeah,
elf.
I think, yeah. Oh, well, something like that. That's an impolite question to ask.
Most definitely. Certainly rude in in polite society.
But appropriate enough that Basil, is the one to bring it up. I think that's perfect. He's like, has anyone noticed?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know if we have established whether she is, because we've got Dr. King's illustration, but I mean that could very well be.
I think she was an elf.
Yeah, I think she was full-blooded
she-
elf as well, but interesting. Maybe there's something in Betty's background that you're not aware of. Let's see here. Is there anything else we talked about in the first half of the show that we haven't had Sean comment on? Oh, the house rules, I guess, is one thing. I mentioned, Sean, this is the only... Pathfinder 2 has a distinction of being one of the only games that I don't house rule anything on. I always typically run it rules as written, just because it seems to fit my sensibilities for games I like to run. The one optional rule we play with is something from the Game Mastery Guide to account for the fact that I don't give out gear in this one. So I don't award any loot, really. You guys have some things, like Sally's got those extendable fists, and Basil's got that listening device. But we haven't really, it hasn't really been, this isn't a loot-heavy thing. So that's the only optional rule we've been using, is to the one where we adjust the math on your attacks and stuff like that to account for it. And I think that as far, once we've been getting into the second kind of tier of what do you call it, of play, I found like the fights feel perfectly tuned, over the last 2 levels now. Like, now that we've had you guys doing double damage dice with stuff, but
Yeah. Particularly
how I
Sally.
like to hit things two squares away.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where I was going too. The biggest standout I can think of, I'm probably forgetting something, but is really Sally's character with, the reach, but also the amount of damage has been.
Your car was yours. I'm like, I know that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Respawn got the
good call.
jumper cable things that he used to defeat the Kelpie, and then you've got your horseless carriage, which has proven to be a very...
I was totally just because I was thinking to myself, when you said the gear thing and that we, and you were mentioning off a few pieces, I'm like, oh my gosh, like Golad got something. What did he get? And I couldn't think of it because, once again, there's, it's sort of a combat centric thought, and because I don't use it. Obviously, it's not a combat item. It's it's a narrative fun. So now that you say it, it's so obvious. Which is great. I think that's so Golag too. It's much better than I think. If it was something for combat, that'd be obviously totally fine. But I think it's better, more suited for Golag than it's not. It's part of the shop.
The goggles and the scarf coming.
Yeah, the smoke out the back and the whole and the logo on the side is critical.
Of course. And that's, it's funny, because so I think a lot of what has come from the game, and in terms of the setting, has come from us just inhabiting that. Like, I love the way that we're learning about the place by you guys going. And one of the things I've had has been a truism for years and years for me for any game I run, is that we might make up stuff on the fly, but like once it's in the game, it's in the game. So it can matter and it can have consequence and whatever. And the way that you're all on board with that, like you don't try and you didn't know the name of this NPC, therefore they're not important. Like, it's been great to be able to just say like, okay, well, this character, we didn't have a name for it. I've got a name for it now. Now they might be something that's important, going forward. You guys, she hasn't played a huge amount in this since the Endless Odyssey, but the woman whose husband,
Eugenia Hunter.
Yeah, Eugenia is a regular presence in your house now because you guys saved her. Was that in Poverty Pond, or was that in that was in Endless Odyssey, right? Because you guys were attacked by those shadow creatures when you went to visit her.
Yeah.
It was both, I think. I would say that it was her house, and she was involved with the pond, right? She didn't have, did she have?
Her husband was at the bottom of it, wasn't he?
Yeah,
no.
That's what I was thinking. Different person.
I'm trying to remember what happened to her husband. Did he just run off, or?
No, that was the thing where we found this ancient cult So he was likely turned into a monster or something like that. So this Captain Hunter was one of those sailors who transformed.
Oh, I'm thinking of two different people. Yeah, Eugenia Hunter
Yeah.
is Sally's friend.
Exactly. That's
Yeah. I'm confusing it with what's her name? The who's the woman who's come to work for you guys?
Yeah. Was it Winifred Shea?
Claire. That's Claire.
Sabina.
Sabina.
Sabina, yeah.
Right, because she was fired by Lady Peyton Hall when she seemed to recognize... Is she the one who recognized Augie Thatch? For
Yes.
Right, that's what it was. Okay. Right.
And I don't even feel about characters important or unimportant. I mean, there's a sense of mystery and everyone has these secrets and it's just fun to uncover them. But so far we only made it possible to uncover more secrets instead of revealing the truth, let me put it this way. So there's always a second or third layer behind. So yeah.
Yeah, in every story arc, we sort of close one story and open about 6. That's generally, at the start of the session, we list about 8 things that we'd like to do, and then do one of them.
Well, this is where the,
sort of prioritize.
your employer comes in of like, well, no, but we need to get paid, so this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah, and most of it has to do with Sally's reluctance to go into the water. I mean, that has to be said. I mean, more than once. Yeah.
Well, it's good cause. The water's full of fucking kelpies or unknown things.
And things keep trying to kill me, and it plays havoc with my dresses.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was the Margoyle that you guys faced that tried to kill Sally underwater. There was the Kelpie that tried to kill Sally underwater. There was something that was in the bay as well.
Yep. That didn't sound like it was good news either.
No.
We still got that ghost ship.
Yeah, and we have the submarine.
And submarine as well.
Yep.
Yes.
Because what could go wrong with going in a submarine down into the Spire?
Nothing. It could be.
You did get there was a tip-off for the ghost ship. I believe that you received at the party when you guys attended the fundraiser for Dr. Ursprung's charity.
Enormous
so many
crustacean
mysteries.
seen in the sewer. Second ship missing but never came back. Haunted. The ship ate people. Those were all rumors of that I have down.
There's a small community called Dag on the Sea, which is like further up the coast, which was related to that ghost ship.
Yeah.
So
We have to go there, and we have to maybe use this submarine at some point in time.
Yeah, we have yet to meet. I think it's Captain Zalazo.
Yeah.
On screen yet. Captain Eugenia Hunter wanted to introduce him. That's the fun thing. I think at the start of each of these campaigns, each of the mysteries is giving, going back to Basil's conspiracy board and being like, okay, what are the things that we have as threads we can pull on here?
You're just trying to get the whole ghost ship thing so you can live up to the rat of a sinking ship.
I do have that as a goal in every campaign. Like how fast can I introduce a ship and then destroy it or sink it or whatever? So
yeah. So the weird part about Basil is that he is a rat who is untrained in survival. So that's actually his worst skill is survival.
He's kind of an upper class rat in that way, maybe.
Yeah, but he's one of the deep rats, so actually he should be. But somehow, it's a mystery.
he was always more into books than he was into other things, hence his occult score and his arcana score. I can't remember, does he have arcana or is it, I know he has occult.
Yeah, I think it's just so one of the benefits of being an investigator is that you learn everything. So I think occult and even arcana, yes, it's trained now.
Yeah.
But I can't do any spells, and I will never be able to, and that's fine. Yeah.
The one of the things that I typically do in long-term campaigns is use war stories. And again, I've done that before, since before the before we ever had the channel. I used to call them Lessons from the Past off of a old Legend of the Five Rings card, and then changed it to war stories just because it fit better for the type of campaign, and I've stuck with it since then. We've run one thus far using Savage Worlds. That was pretty fun. I really enjoyed at least running it, and it was neat showing some more parts of Paridar that we don't get to see. We don't get to see tanks very often in our mysteries here. But one of the reasons I think why one of the reasons I haven't thus far is because not only I can tweak any combat encounter to fit with whatever the people we have at the table are, so I'm not going to be worried about overwhelming them. But also the nature of the game, or the campaign at least, is investigative. So it's not like there's we can't play this part of the game because we're missing XYZ. So I don't have the need to fill that time up with it. But that said, if you would, and I don't intend to have war stories be a regular part of the game, because there's plenty of mystery we have to investigate, and we can always spend a session looking into someone's backstory or whatnot. If we were to do a war story, what game system do you think, in your mind, would fit with Paridar? That's one of the fun things with the war stories too, is seeing sometimes the same characters through the lens of a different game. We in our Night Below campaign, we've done Pathfinder 2, we've done what have we used for D&D 4th edition, Star Wars, 2 versions of Star Wars, a 2D20 based game and a Savage Worlds based game.
I could see maybe 2D20 with its options. Like, you could give our characters things to spend momentum on, perhaps, that reflected the character.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking you're thinking more on because 2D20 is a wide spectrum of different types of games. You're thinking closer to like Act 10 Cthulhu?
Yeah.
I think the backstory of Golak, where he became introduced to the shadow in After Cthulhu, that would be nice. Yes.
Yeah.
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 Backstory of getting involved in ships in honor and intrigue. There you go.
Oh yeah, honor and intrigue for Sally. That would be also great.
What do you think, Darren?
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so good with the systems because I haven't played as many as a lot of you guys. But I'm just intrigued of, yes, Sally's background and where she's come from, and just, yeah, what happened there, how she got to Paridar. I find that intriguing, and the same with Golag. We've obviously done a little bit with Basil because you did that war story, and the Doctor's basically born in Paridar from what we understand. So yeah, I'd love to know a bit more about the backgrounds of Sally and Golag, but I'm not sure what system I would recommend, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but then again, so for the Doctor, even how did he manage to have some kind of clinic in this district? I mean, so you met Dr. Raycraft, and then he said, well, you be a doctor, then there must be something more to it. I suppose.
But it feels like it's actually tied into the campaign a bit more, that if you had the sort of what happened, it would, well, I don't think it would spoil it, but it would answer some of the questions that we're still unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not, but
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because an example of a character who, like, there was sort of an unwritten rule in comics that, like, you never would know where Wolverine came from. We knew that he had a mystery, background or whatnot, but the sort of accepted rule was that you'll never find out. And then we found out, and then more, and then more, and then more, and then more. And, like, to a degree, that sort of sort of ruined an element of mystique about the character and sort of focused on the wrong part of what made that character interesting in a way. But there was also some really good stories that were told about that era, and I think there's like the Weapon X story is quite good with showing us some part of what Wolverine's story is, but it doesn't just give you like answer unknown questions. If anything, it introduces more stuff, and I think that that was my intent with the with Basil's war story, was that because we had established like early on that he was a veteran and he had served with Hannibal, but that we haven't really referenced that again since some of the earliest sessions of this. So I thought it would be a good idea to go back and be like, all right, let's see what it was like for him in the war, because we know that like he did have that experience at the time, and he wasn't born an investigator. It was something that he's come to after time. And there's I think there's a way of addressing some of the mysteries of our heroes that does fill in some interesting backstory, but doesn't like give the full history of what's happened, what's led from here to there.
Yeah, or how Basil and Golak met in the first place. So why is this strange red working for this investigator?
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Oh, and how does Sally fall in with all of you too?
Yeah, she appeared on deck of a ship, and then there she was.
Well, she was
mermaid.
She was definitely part of the like society set for quite some time. But like, how does she go from that to working with you lot? And I guess more to the point, why does she do it? All the rest of you guys have some. Golag's got a vested interest in, seeing a successful business in the same area where his father is. Basil seems more driven by the mystery than he does the job. Dr. Ursprung is always sort of a peripheral. He's always been careful to describe himself as an associate of it, not necessarily one of the Illuminators. But why the hell does Sally do this in the first place?
Yeah, she's spying on us land dwellers.
Going through all game systems, trying to figure what...
Yes, it's one of the things that it's a fun, like for myself, like it's something, especially when you've got, like you guys have clear character ideas in mind that can be then translated. You can take the core of the character and look at it through a different lens. It's interesting. When it's in like just small shifts, I don't find it like in our Night Below campaign, we haven't run a D&D 5th edition game because 5th edition is, in my mind, close enough to like C&C or AD&D 2 that we're not really seeing a substantial new lens for it. But like Pathfinder 2 is a very different game. D&D 4th is a very different game. Savage Worlds is a very different game. So it's interesting seeing them and even stretching them to the point of near breaking. Cult Divinity Lost would be a very different perspective on these characters, but at its core, we're looking at a mystery campaign that's very roleplay heavy. So, it wouldn't be, it would still be recognizable as the characters.
Yeah, let me add another one.
Wondering about Pulp Cthulhu.
Oh, Pulp Cthulhu, yeah. Cities of Mist would be also.
Yes. Yeah, because that is definitely a mystery structured game. We've only run 2 sessions of that, actually, or I've only run 2 sessions of that, I should say, and both were really good. It's one of those games that I don't know why I don't run it more often. Cult Divinity Lost too. Like every time we play that game, I enjoy the shit out of it. It's not one of those games that jumps to mind as one of our like must-run games.
Yeah. So I think we could, if we wanted to, we could replicate each character in City of Mist and just give it a session, because it is a very narrative game. So you don't have to have all the details. You just make short tags and then everything is fine.
Yeah.
And then we know who the characters are, so that would work. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there's also, but this is not really a recommendation, but an idea. If I was trying to recreate what Paridar was or something, I would look at something like Microscope. Has anyone of you ever played Microscope?
Yeah.
That is fantastic, because you now have this co-creation of some kind of setting. I don't think that is really apt for Paridar, but I like this idea. We played a couple of sessions in our self-created setting that way. That was nice.
And that's the thing that is Paridar itself, I think, at least what I'm intending is like the setting itself is also a mystery. So in addition to the characters in themselves are part of it and don't think beyond whatever their experience is, but it's on that extra level for the players to be thinking of like, why the fuck is this working this way, or why is whatever? And if you're not running a campaign if there's something isn't as intrinsic to that, where it's supposed to be a mystery, that's something that, like, say, 13th Age does as well, where, having the characters introduce something unique about their character that also then says something about the setting. That's really great. And 13th Age is supposed to be an emergent... it's an emergent world where at the end of, things are introduced over the course of a session, and at the end of the session, you say, okay, what's going to be canon for this? Are orcs the best, clockwork smiths in this thing, or whatever? And that's a neat way of playing the game, but also organically building up a setting around it. For this game, we've been doing that to a degree in this already, but because of the nature of the mystery of the setting, that does limit, it does put some kind of restrictions on your abilities to do that.
Yeah.
But say bullshit railroad DM, come on. James, in your search of the list of game systems, any other ideas?
The honor and intrigue would really work, but the trouble is there's no VTT support, as Sean said. That's the problem with it. Yeah. Otherwise, it would work just great.
Mm-hmm.
But do you need so much support? I mean, you just roll d6s and that's it. I mean, I've never. So, as far as I remember, it's the same game as Barbarians of Lemuria, but with a different setting, basically.
There is
but it's got quite a lot of moves and the like of that. But need a bit of setup, I think, just to get it. Or there'd be a certain amount of loading, that's for sure. Now, the other one, I just wanted, and I've never played it, and I think, but given that I'm a monk and we're talking about narrative, would be Fate with some Tianxia thrown in.
Yeah, I've never run Fate, and I've only kind of half-assed read it. But the thing that what I understand is some of the things I like best about like Star Trek Adventures or Acton Cthulhu, of how they use truths to sort of replicate certain game mechanics in the scenes or the circumstances. It seems like it would be something that would fit well with this game. From what the scenes that Darren mentioned as being his standout ones of the chase and the train thing, those were very similar to the way we would loosely run those types of scenes in those games as well. So I bet you it would be the same type of thing, because that's, from what I understand, Fate has that same type of thing where you like write shit on cards and you introduce it to scenes to be things you can play off of.
Yep, there's exactly, there are keywords to hang off, and you can leverage to progress the story.
Well, and the Dresden Files RPG has a similar, it's based off of Fate, and it has a similar thing where you're setting up the campaign for your city. It's similar to how sort of things have played out in Paridar for us, where there are certain mysteries and certain factions and certain things that we're focusing on over the course of play. But in that game, you just sort of do it from the outset to help collectively decide what you're doing for the setting. My buddy Chad has run it a couple of times, and he actually has used that to set up D&D campaigns too. So if you're wanting to run a similar type of site-based, city-based campaign, that gives you some good tools for involving everybody the way you suggested, Ingolf, with Microscope to get the game kind of set.
Yeah. So in that vein, there's also Smallville. I don't know if you ever played it.
Mm-mm.
And Smallville is from the core. It seems like a superhero game, but it isn't. it's a game about relationships. So you every relationship between the character has some dice mechanics to it, and what you do is you basically convince persons to do something for you, and whether they're superpowered or not, that's not the real deal of that game. It's more about this like in the series, they are superheroes, but it is a character drama series, not about so. And that is something that would work here as well, because everything is connected to these. You have organizations in the back, you have the connections, and so on.
So that's an interesting point too. One of the things there is in PF2 rules for like relationship with factions, and in part because I just haven't taken the time to set them so that you guys have an idea of what your scores are with things. But running Traveler again, I'm reminded that like that's not present in Traveler, and that doesn't prevent the players from fully throwing themselves into interacting with the fiction and trying to set up things in the setting. You know, if I had put a score on here to, you know, be like, well, your relationship with Collingwood University is currently a 3, you know, and if you pursue towards a 4, there's going to be XYZ tangible goals. That definitely adds a structure to the game to make clear incentives you could work towards from a game mechanic by. But it feels like in Traveler that we don't even need to do that really. For you guys are choosing how to value that based on what's happening in the campaign and what your organic relationship is with those characters.
That's true. Yeah.
One more system. Age?
Age, yeah. Fantasy Age 2nd edition.
Yeah, Age is an interesting... I think I need to take another pass at that one. I've bounced off it because of the massive lists of shit you're looking at for your stunt points. It's the problem I've had with Conan 2D20 in past, where the game slows down so much where I feel that players are looking at their options for momentum spends, and I felt it was a similar experience with the stunt mechanics in that, the few times I've run it. But I think that's because over the course of the multiple games they've released, those lists have gotten longer and longer and longer as new options have been introduced.
Because Dragon Age is fairly short.
Dragon Age is relatively short. Modern Age has fucking 8 pages worth of different things for every situation, which is not a criticism of the game. It's fine, like if you want an abundance of options. But they did introduce in the Game Mastery Guide, they're like, look, if this is too much for you, here's how to streamline it and just run it fast and loose. I think that would be an interesting one. For me, I mean, we've already played with it too, but one of the reasons why I think Savage Worlds is such a good fit for Paridar too is it has all those subsystems and mini games that we use in the scope of the skill system in Paridar or in Pathfinder 2. It has all those fun little ways, and one of the ways where I think Savage Worlds is a little superior to it is that they do play differently. So it's not always going to be working towards get a X, more X than Y on things. Each of them is different, which just adds enough of a bit of a twist so you're feeling like you're doing something different. And I think of the difference between like this is going back to Shadowrun, but like Shadowrun 3rd and the Shadowrun 4th. One of the biggest difference between those editions that came afterwards and those that came before is that it was a different set of rules when you were decking, and it was a different set of rules when you were controlling drones, and a different set of rules when you were using magic. And it meant that you had to learn a whole bunch of shit and keep track of these different things. So that was a pain in the ass, and it was it wasn't as easy to get in and just switch from playing one type of character to another type of character. But every time you interacted with any of those things, it made it feel very different because there's a different set of rules that were governing it. So it wasn't just the same core mechanic that we're using that was reskinned to be something else. And that is something they've done for the other ones. That's not a fair... There are differences between each of those things, but they're much closer to how you do decking, to how you do magic, to how you do whatever in the more modern editions, which means they're a lot more accessible and whatnot. But that is a small way that I think that where Savage Worlds has a little bit of a it offers that little bit of extra differentiation and variety in the way that the game mechanics are interacting with the story, because they're different. A chase in that feels different than a dramatic task, which feels different from an interlude, which feels different from combat.
Yeah, but I mean, Savage Worlds has this thing that you make more use of the different levels of randomness of the cards. So normally you have the only this dice mechanics, and you can only have so many different options with dice. But the card mechanics combined with dice offer more variety. I think that's what Savage Worlds.
Yeah, that's a really good
uses.
observation, because it's honestly, it's one of the reasons why Genesis has always been like Genesis, which is the core mechanic that was used in the Star Wars, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games. Those games you always had results in those in you know, like especially the early levels, you would have results from the dice mechanics that you would not see in other games. You would have, I succeeded, but some shitty thing has happened, or I failed, but some good opportunity has come from it, expressly set in the game. And there was also the possibility of outstanding outcomes and terrible, terrible complications that was built into the dice mechanics in a way that allowed DM bullshittery that a lot of other games, it would feel too much like the DM putting their thumb on the scale of things. And that's a really interesting point, Ingolf, because I hadn't thought of it that way. In a similar way, there's another aspect to it beyond just the dice result with Savage Worlds.
Genesis is a good system in its way. It's got its issues as ever, but
yeah, every game's got its challenges or its issues with it. But some of my favorite single sessions in particular have come from using that game. It's a solid. I think at higher levels, it kind of breaks down when you get too big of a dice pool. It just is kind of it's not even that it's unpredictable. It's just that it's in the sense that it can be swingy, really good, really bad. It's just like every dice roll could be completely different, and with all the different variety of different results. So that's a lot of. Yep. That's interesting to see. A lot of different ways that we could, be viewing the world of Paridar. So.
I have to say, though, I think this discussion shows that there was no obvious aha, I don't think, out of that list, which shows the strength of Pathfinder on this setting.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And it has, like, I don't think there's an aspect of the adventure we've been playing where I felt like, I can't handle this part. I can't add game mechanics, or I need game mechanics but don't have them in any part of the campaign. Go ahead, Ingolf.
I just wanted to say, so there is also the benefit that it is still at its core, it is D&D like. So it's not completely against the tradition. You don't have a D6 pool system or something like that. So it kind of feels familiar, and that's also good. I mean, it's not a bad thing, I would say.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I find with, especially with Traveler, less so with Call of Cthulhu, because I had in my mind for a long time that Call of Cthulhu, because the character sheet is not that complex, that a lot of the way that game shines is at the table, and I just the recent running the game, I more felt that it was just the game mechanics in Call of Cthulhu 6 did nothing for me. It was so, there wasn't enough nuance to it. That's not the case with Traveler, but Traveler has a similar thing where there's not a lot of fanciness to the system to keep you occupied. The system is there to provide a little bit of, because of the ways of degrees of success work in that game, you can have some more fun, like, extended challenges or things like that. But at the end of the day, the fun in that game is not going to come from the game mechanics in it. It's going to come from the world and the people you're interacting with. And it sounds like that's kind of what you guys are doing in this game too. That PF2 does provide a great spine for it and gives us the game mechanics to fall back on to give meat to the parts where we need to determine what's happening with the rules, whether that's combat or chases or whatever. but much of it is just focused on whatever's happening in the game or the fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
I think Anna says reminds me it's close to time for a walk. Darren had answered in an interesting way too. Are there, about the war story, are there aspects of the setting, the story, or the characters? Because one of the things that war stories I often use for is not just for filling in character backstories, it's also to show different parts of the setting. So like this is stolen directly from the D&D 4th edition DMG 2, which our buddy George helped write. But there's a great suggestion in there of using a type of war story to basically like communicate the level of threat with something. Have the players play guards on a wall somewhere who then face something and are massacred by it. So the players know that something is coming, but the characters do not. And you can't do that all the time, but it can be a fun way of having a stakes-free bloodbath with real no-holds-barred kind of thing. Nice. I've used that in our old Iron Kingdoms campaign to telegraph what's happening in different parts, like away from the characters are, and also give the characters a chance to play something different. And rather than the game mechanics, what part of the setting or the characters you've met do you think that is something that would be of interest to you to learn more about by way of playing as opposed to learning in the course of discovery? Now, I'm not saying necessarily that we'll do that. I'm curious if there is a part of the setting you're like, I need to know more about X, Y, Z.
There's two that spring to mind for me straight away. Mm-hmm. The vampiric serum during the war, how that came about and what effect it had, and how it was used, and just generally something about that. And the other one, probably not so much at the moment, but I think the ghost ship would be an interesting one. What happened to the crew?
Yeah.
And living through the experience of the crew, and
mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's got a grisly end, but yeah. But that one's still sort of live, as it were.
Yeah.
I like the ghost ship. Yeah, that's a good call. That's a no-brainer in a sense.
And for the ghost ship, what's its name? The zombie game.
Oh,
that we had
all flesh must be eaten. Oh,
interesting.
Yeah. I do have the Dungeons and Zombies supplement for that too, so it would easily be convertible.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Sean and Ingolf? Any thoughts on areas that your characters may not directly explore, but might are nagging at you as unknowns?
I mean, mine was goes to Golag's occult background with his patron, but it may be too close. I don't know if that's doable with other characters, because it's so direct to Golag. So that's where my mind went, and then I'm like, I don't know how you do that without Golag being involved himself. But that's the first place.
Well, that would be your shop steward's problem, I think, to figure out whether it's something that's interesting or you're curious of. That's a wholly separate question.
Or something, I think with my father, there's a lot of meat. There's a lot of meat there that possibly could provide something that.
What does Skulldug's average day look like?
Yeah, right. There's a lot of things. Dirk, could you go with that? Yeah.
Or something around Sally's social rise and fall. If we've got a game with social mechanics, social.
I would just think after now having realized this problem with the Kelpie, and there's might be some way to get to another realm from Paridar, that there could be other such infestations or incursions into Paridar, and we don't know about them. And I'm sure there are. I mean, So there must be, and maybe sometimes it's just these curious birds. You remember those? I mean,
Yep.
oh, I don't know. Maybe there is someone, I don't know, having a shark in his pool or whatever.
That's well.
That reminds me,
is
we need to go get a shotgun at some point.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, I've just thought of one more, which was I think would be fun to play the children of the Gallfather in some way. And see
Tales from the Loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but oh no, come on, don't. Yeah, violence to children is legal.
In this case,
no,
it is very
but-
likely violence inflicted by children, not
I was-
upon them. So.
I was going to say
so,
what they got up to rather than how they got into that stage.
Yeah. So, Annie, in our closing minutes of this, guys, any closing thoughts on our Spires of Paridar campaign? Anything that we haven't talked about thus far that you want to talk about in our year and a half look back at the first year and a half of this campaign?
yeah, maybe something I said sometime ago already, but I think what makes it work is we have this small episodic kind of case files we are working on, and then the world around it. So we have this microstructure so that the characters have something immediate to do, but there's also the world around us. And I think that makes it's like the modern way that the series are structured. If you look at this streaming series, almost all of them have this kind of structure where you have this more micro things and then this larger plot
It's
in
funny,
the
like
background.
it's a bit of advice that's put into most modern RPGs nowadays, at least ones that deal with like designing campaigns. But I remember the first time I read that was in a White Wolf magazine. There was an article that was talking about use TV as a structure for designing your campaigns back in like late 90s. The magazine would have come out mid 90s maybe. But it's precisely what I did with this is to try and one of the reasons being is that in ongoing campaigns, it's sometimes where there isn't an end, like our Night Below campaign, it's sometimes hard in a sandbox campaign to have characters feel like there's a sense of accomplishment, where like, okay, I have done X, and not every player needs that, but some players do. And I know myself, I'm a very task-oriented person. So having at least something to be like, and we reach the end of this, that helps add some differentiation and some sense of accomplishment in the course of long ongoing campaigns. I think I don't want to reword what you're trying to say there, Ingol, but I think that's what you were getting at too. Is it's something that is a really important lesson I've drawn from writing for this campaign is that approach. Our Traveler campaign is adopting a similar thing, even though we're playing a similar loosey-goosey kind of like go where you want kind of thing. I want to make sure that there's a differentiation for it because. In our Night Below campaign, at one point, I felt like we're just fucking spinning wheels here. Like, the players don't have a clear goal they're working toward. They're not seeing clear progress. The players didn't feel that way, but I certainly felt that way. So, that's a good idea for taking that model of multi-season, but, writing for the episode, writing for the arc for a campaign.
I'm reminded that Warhammer Fantasy 4th has... character short-term goals, character long-term goals, and then party goals in the mechanics, so that they're rewarded. It's there with a mechanical reward, very specific mechanical reward for each of those, and a place in the game for the players to work on those. That's something it's an item. Like you got to do this. You need to go ahead and think about this.
So Soulbound, the Warhammer fan Age of Sigmar game has those ideas for advancing, but they also introduce this fucking cool idea of rumors, fears, and threats. Rumors, what you hear about You know, as things out are going to be advancing as it. Threats are like, I think the thing is going to happen. Fears are, I think this thing's going to happen. Threats are, it's fucking here. And one of the ways that the Doom mechanic in that game interacts is that rumors become fears, and fears become threats. So and then at the end of, you know, each arc, you introduce new rumors. So it has this organic feel on an ongoing campaign, or at least it's intended to be, that there's a feeling of like, this shit didn't come out of nowhere. Like, I've known about these things, and you know that if rumors are there, I can maybe deal with this when it's a fear before it becomes a threat. There's an added thing in that game of the higher the Doom is, like boss monsters get some of their stats are based on Doom. So there's an inbuilt reason in that game to try and go and like quash the shit before it gets big, because otherwise the threats grow more powerful. And like, you don't need to adopt that aspect of it, but I think it's a neat idea to think about how to manage those intangibles, like potential future adventures of like rumor, fear. And you don't need to communicate it to the players that way. You just sprinkle it out there and trust that they've seen media before and they understand how that shit works.
Yep. You know, another mechanic that just and I really like it when the game mechanizes some of these things, because for the GM or for everybody, but it's hard to bring it into play. Like, well, let me mention a little bit of maybe a trouble spot in a game that I'm playing right now, and then a way that another game I think answers it well. So I'm playing right now Savage Worlds, and one of the edges you can take is veteran. If anyone knows this, I can't remember quite the name. It's veteran of the Wild West or something like this.
The Weird West.
Weird West. Yeah. And it's a little bit of an interesting, you know, there's a question of whether it's overpowered or not, because it's basically everyone has, you know, the ranks, and you novice, seasoned, etc. And if you take that edge, it makes you seasoned rather than novice, and it essentially gives you in exchange for what is essentially a major hindrance, it gives you 4 advances. So it's a little iffy mechanically. You look at it mathematically, like, why isn't everyone taking this in a sense? Because it's a little tipped towards towards the benefit, and it doesn't give being in this right now, it doesn't give the GM, I don't think, quite enough. It's arguably doesn't give the GM quite enough support to be able to really bring that into play, to make it balanced again, to be hard on those players in a sense. Another game that I think does that particularly well is the FFG Star Wars game, where, if you'll recall, it has that mechanic where you take I can't remember what it's called now, but you take an obligation. I think it's called an obligation, and it goes on a table that the GM actually rolls for every session to see if that comes into play, which I think is just so good, because it makes it mechanized. So, like, it brings it right into it, you know? That's
an interesting way of bringing it back to this. One of the things that was really fucking cool about Twilight Imperium, they introduced the idea of agendas. You may remember that the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games were 3 different games. There was Age of Rebellion, there was Edge of the Empire, and Force and Destiny. And each of them had different kind of that type of thing. What this does is it takes the idea of agendas, of like, you're working towards something, and that's usually linked up with your patron. And there's a variety of different patrons that are in there, but they link rewards to agenda goals. You have different benchmarks to work towards different achievements in it. And the more you get these things, you get rewards. And some of those are XP, and some of those are like credits or like gear or whatever. But it's a neat way of letting the players help decide how they're going to advance through the game, you know? And it's I think a more flexible way than the problem I ran into with the FFG Star Wars is if you're playing one character from Age of Empire, one Age of Rebellion, one from Edge of the Empire, one from whatever else, which one do you use? Do you use all of them? Do you use one of them? Do you whatever? And the agenda allows you to individualize it with each of them.
Does Imperium Maledictum have something or something similar?
Quite possibly. I haven't read far enough into Imperium Maledictum yet. That's that new Warhammer 40k game.
Yeah, I'd give a similar answer that I'm not familiar enough off the top of my head to know.
I think to remember it's an evolution of the sort of reputation thing from the Dark Heresy, and there was something similar there that was building on that. But I agree. Same here. I haven't read enough into it.
I want to say it's influence, or yeah.
How about you, Darren? Any closing thoughts on Paridar thus far? Now we haven't touched on.
Well, no, I mean I've said many times before. This is my favourite sort of campaign or game that we play on the channel. So I think we've covered everything, but mainly because of the players and the characters and the world and the system. You know, it's everything. Everything just works. Everything fits together, and yeah, it's just worked, and that's why it's kept going for so long, and everyone's reliably been playing, and yeah, that's it really.
Well, as Sean, before you got on, Darren had mentioned how he thought a really interesting next twist would be for one of the characters to die in the thing. A little extreme for my taste, but definitely.
Yeah, that'd be
That ain't what
I
he
thought
said.
it would come from something like family conflict or something like that.
Twisted
You
my
know-
words.
there is a rule that if you're not here, we'll talk about you. It's a solid rule that I support, actually. So,
Anyone else have any other closing thoughts about Paridar?
only thing I was, it's more of a topic than I was about an hour ago. I was probably going to mention that if we didn't have something else to talk about, that of how our characters' advancement, like we haven't talked too much about advancement and how advancement maybe have changed our how we think have changed our characters. That's that's a topic, not a comment. So, but I'll throw that out there that I had that thought that it's because it's changed Golag a little bit, as you get more spells, they go in a certain direction and, that kind of a thing. It's an interesting, and Pathfinder does a good job. I think Pathfinder has some accolades there that makes it easy to engage with your character in that way. That's fun.
As Sally's noted as well, as each level goes up, Golag's waistline seems to get a little bit larger.
Yeah.
You just wait till I climb or swim, and you'll see. You'll see.
Yeah. So
Swim, I gotta see.
So we are a little bit puzzled by Golag. He seems to be cursed, and now he's a necromancer, and so it's getting uncomfortable.
Anna agrees.
Don't fear what you don't understand. It's all fine. It's perfectly reasonable.
Well, that is, it's funny that I thought that, I'm like, I don't know if we're going to go the full 3 hours, and now we're like, still have more to go. So what we'll do is we'll have to see what happens at the table then. The one thing I was, this has been, for throwing everything, what I thought would be the things that I love the most. There are, I don't have favorites among my kids, as it were, for it, but I will tell you that this is the closest to like the ideal way for me to run and prep, to run and play a game of any RPG. This to me, the way that you guys choose to play your characters, the way you guys interact with the world and whatnot, this is just, I could not ask for a better fit between it. I always thoroughly enjoy our sessions. I love exploring this setting with you guys and learning more about these characters. It's just been an absolute joy running this campaign. I can't believe it's gone 1.5 years already. So
No, it's good. Campaigns are good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Well, especially for
That's
someone
right.
who, like I said, is happy. The only way I do express my patience is in the long burn. This is a great game for that, of putting those things out there and letting them sit, and it says a lot about, someone had commented recently about how much they enjoyed what you guys brought to, in particular, to the Paridar setting. Wayne had gone back and was revisiting, one of our regular viewers, revisiting that too. And it's been, it's been great from a DM's perspective too, because of a lot of the elements we've talked about. I don't have to prep a lot of stuff beforehand too. I just have to have in my mind what I think Paridar would be like, or who you might, encounter or whatnot. And then it's just a matter of, we sit down and suddenly 3 hours are done and we're talking about the next session. So thank you for you guys for such a
No,
great,
thank you for that.
great
Yeah,
series.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry for what's going to happen next turn.
No, like Darren said,
Yeah, Darren's idea of killing the character, right?
I'm not taking the blame for this.
I think his specific phrasings were Dr. Earthsprung would have raw materials.
Yeah, I think, I mean, come on, go like it's only natural to make room at the top. So that's.
Well, this is starting to feel like a
Bit of
a revolution.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to go back and watch the start.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Succession planning's a thing, you know.
Seriously.
So for those listening at home, thank you so much for joining us for this one-year retrospective. This was just a ton of fun to do. Thank you guys for making the time for this. We will be back in the streets of Paridar in 2 weeks' time to kick off our next mystery, which I don't think I've got the name for just yet, but we'll have to talk on Discord about what you guys want to pursue, or if we want to do it I know Sean's going to be at the gaming convention next week or next session. So if you want to do a interstitial session, we could certainly do that as well. But in any event, we'll be back in the streets of Paridar in 2 weeks' time. Until then, other outro stuff. Hold on. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding this retrospective, please do not hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section of the video, and I'll endeavor to reply in a timely fashion. In addition, there's a link down below in the description of the video to the Dungeon Musings Discord server. We have a channel there dedicated to the Spires of Paridar campaign, as well as most other campaigns we run on the channel. There's also a Pathfinder 2nd Edition channel if you want to talk about that specifically. And if you there's a terrific community over there. There's other channels as well, like finding a group or just general great conversation or advice on game mastering or advice on tabletop, virtual tabletops. You're more than welcome to join us over there. There's also a link down below to our friends at Noble Knight Games. Noble Knight Games is the preeminent retailer of hard-to-find and out-of-print RPGs in North America. They have not only a great selection of, unionized, I should say, in keeping in the spirit of Paridar, they're the unionized retailer of hard-to-find and out-of-print RPGs. Not only do they have a great selection of new role-playing games, board games, and card games, they also have an unmatched selection of hard-to-find and out-of-print RPGs. And they have a feature as well called a want list for their hard-to-find and out-of-print ones. So if they have something listed that is not in stock, you can, I'm telling them, you can often put it on a want list, and they'll send you an email when it comes in, and then you'll be able to pick it up. Right now, they're having their spring sale, but when that is over, if you enter the code SPRINGMUSER, all caps, all one word, at checkout, you'll save yourself 10% on any purchase of $10 or more. There's also a link down below to something called Heroes Save Villages. That's a charity fundraising campaign we run on the channel. It benefits the SOS Children's Villages International Charity, a really amazing organization active in over 130 countries, providing benefits to over 80,000 orphan and abandoned children, including ongoing relief efforts in Ukraine and the surrounding countries. If you make any donations through that link, they go directly to SOS Children's Villages International. None of it goes to the channel or any other middleman. It just goes to help out the kids who benefit from their services. And as a small way of saying thank you, if you donate $10 or more since January 1st, you can head on over to the Charity Initiatives channel on the Dungeon Musings Discord server and cast your vote for the next leg of our year-long charity campaign. Voting is currently deadlocked on one element, so we need a tiebreaker by the end of the day, or we're going to have to put it to the a recount, not a recount, what do you call it? By-election for those two game systems and see what everyone prefers. But we've had 2 sessions that have been shaped by donors thus far that were a lot of fun, and we're going to have another one in a couple of weeks' time. After that, let's see here. You also have, if you donate $25 or more, you have a chance to win the grand prize or one of the other great prizes in our next charity raffle, which will be at the end of June. The last thing I will say is a huge thank you to our stalwart illuminators. So Darren, Ingolf, James, and Sean, thank you so much for joining me, not only today, but for all of our campaign, this entire campaign. Thanks as well to everyone else who has joined us in Paridar at any point. So George and Carl and Mo, and am I leaving? Did anyone else play at some point that we didn't cover? I'm looking at the characters that were the consulting detectives. I think that covers everybody. John, George, Carl, Mo. There we go. Got everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been an enormous amount of fun. So with that, we'll bring the session to a close. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. But until then, we hope that we gave you a couple of hours to take your mind off the troubles of our world and think about the troubles. Well, not the troubles. Think about the retrospective and the look back on the year and a half that we have spent in the streets of Paridar. And until we see you again, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy gaming.